Welcome to The Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. With us today is a YouTuber who I came across on Twitter, and I was told that I absolutely had to debate this guy on Anarcho-Capitalism. He goes by the name of Liquid Zulu, and he identifies as an objectivist ANCAP. Liquid Zulu, welcome.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Okay, so what do you mean by objectivist ANCAP? What is that exactly?
So basically, I think that objectivism, properly interpreted, it implies the anarcho-capitalist legal theory. I have my previous proofs of the non-aggression principle have been, they haven't really been properly rooted in good philosophy, which is what I've done. Basically, got an alarm going off. Basically, the we can go into it in detail at some point. But the basic idea is that anything other than the non-aggression principle, when it comes to law, that reduces into the primacy of consciousness, which is falsified on objectivist grounds. And I think that the way Rand went wrong was that she was answering the incorrect question when it came up to her politics. She wasn't applying what I call it is law, which I consider a subset of ethics. So I don't consider it like some extra separate branch, which is answering a completely different question. It's, okay, well, we're talking about how should humans be acting? What should they be doing? In this certain subset, which is, well, we've got scarcity, therefore we can have conflicts. How should we deal with conflicts?
Hearing you write about the libertarian non-aggression principle. Some even call it a non-aggression axiom because it's far from axiomatic. It needs to be proven. It can't just be postulated, which seems to be what a lot of libertarians do. They don't derive it from a broader theory of ethics. And I think that Ayn Rand, while she didn't call it the non-aggression principle, she talked about the immorality of initiating force against others. But it's the basic same principles that you shouldn't initiate physical force against another human being, but you do have the right to self-defense. So how do you think that she went wrong in her application?
So basically, one way to put it is I was reading OPAR the other week, and in the section on politics, when Peikoff gets to like the government, he's talking about like, okay, well, how should society be structured, and what are the proper functionings of government? I see a few problems in there. First, it like already assumes that you're going to have this thing called the state, and it's going to be a monopoly on everything, and we're just deciding how it's going to be run. And also, it's taking a sort of primacy of society here, within politics at least. It's like, okay, well, we've got this big society, we've got this collective, and how should this thing operate? It's like, well, hold on, that's the wrong question. The question is, how should the individuals who are part of this group, how should they be acting, right?
Okay, so there's two interrelated questions here as far as from how I see it. One has to do with the ethics of how an individual should act. What I mean by that is if I'm gauging and assessing by a rational standard how I should conduct myself, and I assume you accept Rand's standard of moral value as life is the standard of moral value. And I think it's clear that I ought not to initiate force against others. But that doesn't tell us how to function in a group if somebody else decides to initiate force. So I think that the fundamental question when it comes to how society should be organized or how individuals should interact is, what is the best method of defending and protecting the individual rights of the various people that are engaging in the community? Would you take issue with that formulation?
So I would disagree that we are. Sorry, I forgot the first part of that. I wasn't writing it down quick enough. But I think there are, as far as I see it, two layers to to Rand's argument here. It's first the government. We need government because we need someone to define the laws and say what the laws are, and then we also need a monopoly to enforce those laws. I don't think either of those are required. I don't think you need a monopoly to define or create the laws, because I don't think the laws are defined or created by like an individual or anything. I think they are already a thing, just as it is in aesthetics, right? You don't need some board of artists and they say, okay, right, here are the correct aesthetic principles. It's already inherent in philosophy. You just have to go out there and discover it. And then on the enforcement of laws, I also don't agree that a monopoly is going to be the best way to enforce those laws. I also don't think that excluding other people from defending rights is a good thing. I think that's criminal. So
but what I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to clarify my question. My question is the thing that needs to be answered. The question that needs to be answered first in what you're saying is not what type of government best protects rights. It's what is the best method or what is the best arrangement to protect rights. You agree that individual rights need to be protected, correct? That's important.
Yeah, I think
rights.
I think it's important to defend the rights, but I don't think it is. To be clear, I don't think it is the job of philosophy to be saying what the correct method for sort of defending rights is. I think that's the realm of maybe economics or something, or police studies or whatever it would be called.
Well, see, that seems like a contradiction to me, and I'll let you tell me if I'm wrong, but you did say that politics is a part of ethics, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And ethics is clearly a part of philosophy.
Yeah, but I'm saying that all law does is tell you, okay, this is a justifiable action, this is not justified, this is criminal, this is innocent, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't say, okay, this is criminal, and the correct way you should go about defending that crime is you have 3 handguns, and then you get your buddies together. Like, that is outside the realm of philosophy. You certainly apply philosophy to that, but it's not the realm of philosophy as such to say this is the correct way to go about defending people's rights.
But the question over whether there should be an anarcho-capitalist society with competing agencies or an anarcho-capitalist society with covenant communities or a minarchist government of some sort, those are the proper scope of philosophy. I mean, it maybe not when you get down to everything is philosophy in life. It's the application. I mean, you get that to particulars, but broad parameters are philosophical questions. So whether we should have a government at all, no government, or what, those are philosophical questions that need to be answered.
Well, it would be certainly an application of philosophy, but it's in the same way that, okay, well, should my restaurant be serving steak or chicken on this day? That you'd certainly apply philosophy to that question, or you'd apply economics to it and all sorts of stuff. But that doesn't mean that this is some question within philosophy. If you're having like a history of philosophy course, you wouldn't have like, okay, well, what did Aristotle think about what my restaurant should serve on Wednesdays? Like, it's not part of like philosophy. Philosophy is like really broad stuff. It's the broadest abstraction you can possibly make. So you're not going to have particular stuff which is stuff like, okay, well, what sort of bureaucratic structure should this society have? Now you could certainly apply philosophy if I think that philosophy already has it. That on the philosophy grounds, that we have the non-aggression principle, and the non-aggression principle implies that you don't have a right to stop other people from defending their property. So you can't have a monopolistic defense of property on those grounds. But that's still an application, right? Okay,
so I mean, even going back to the pre-Socratic philosophers, they discussed law and in government. I mean, Plato has an entire work called The Republic, and Aristotle has the Politics. And so, I mean, philosophers, if you were to take a history of philosophy class, you definitely would be coming across political philosophy. I mean, I don't want to get too much bogged down into this particular question because I don't think it really addresses the crux of the debate about anarchism versus minarchism. Sure. But it is important, though, I think, that broadly speaking, politics is a function of philosophy. I mean, is a proper subject of philosophy.
Well, I would say,
and historically, it has been.
If we're going back to ancient Greece, they considered everything to be philosophy because philosophy was just the love of wisdom. So physics is philosophy on that ground, biology. But I agree that it's not really important how we're classifying this is philosophy, this isn't philosophy. So we can maybe move on to more
So, but the question that we want to answer is, you and I would both agree that individual rights are important. And I'm guessing, I don't know because I haven't heard your particular argument for anarcho-capitalism, but I do know, enough about Roy Childs, Murray Rothbard, Lysander Spooner, et cetera, where the argument essentially is that there's no way to have a state that doesn't violate rights, that unless every single member of the body politic consented to the government, then it's not a legitimate government. Is that an accurate portrayal of your view, or do you need to clarify?
I don't think it's about even necessarily everyone agreeing, because, for any enforcement of rights, definitely the guy who's wanting to violate the rights doesn't agree. It's more to do with, okay, well, could you have any sort of a justifiable claim to having monopoly on, let's say, just rights enforcement, or anything? Could I have a monopoly on restaurant and I am the only guy who's able to produce food, right? I think no, because the only way to coherently understand what a monopoly means is you're preventing competition. You're keeping competition out, because it's not just, I'm the only guy who's able to sell Liquid Zulu's hair, right? I could shave it off and sell it, right? That doesn't mean that I have a monopoly, right? Because I'm not holding out competition. It is, and if you're holding out competition, if you're preventing people from, in this case, self-defense, from setting up competing firms for defending rights, then you are essentially operating on the premise that they don't have property rights. So the easy case for this is self-defense. If there's a true monopoly on the use of retaliatory force, then I'm not allowed to use retaliatory force in Randian terms, right? So I'm not allowed to defend my property. So that means that I am not allowed to exclude people from my property. But all a property right means is I have the right to exclude people. So these two ideas are incompatible.
Okay. So what you just said about, if you don't have a right to retaliatory force, you don't have the right to exclude people from your property, that's just, that's inaccurate. And I'll tell you why, because in Randian philosophy, direct self-defense is perfectly allowable. So if somebody forces their way onto your property, you certainly are within your rights to physically remove them from your property. That wouldn't be retaliatory force. That would be direct self-defense.
Well, it is in retaliation to the force. So it's just retaliatory as meaning not initiatory.
Yeah, no, but that's not, that's the thing is, in objectivism, in Rand's political theory, there's two separate things. That there's self-defense, direct self-defense, as if you hit me and I hit you right back. She would call that I'm defending myself from further aggression by you. Whereas retaliatory would be is if you attack me and then you run up the street and then I chase you down and beat you up or whatever, that would be the retaliatory force. I still have the right to self-defense when it's necessary to protect my well-being or the well-being of others. It's the retaliatory force that she says we have to basically I don't know what the right word is. I'm losing it here, but assign to a government or a state is however you want to put it. Delegate is the word, that we delegate our right to retaliatory force to an organization that would have a monopoly over a particular geographical area. But self-defense would still be perfectly appropriate.
Okay, so retaliatory force, that would be something like punishment as against. So to be clear, it would be if somebody like took my TV and they were running in the street and then I chased after them, I'd still be able to take my TV back, right?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, there's obviously, I think there would be, there's always sort of on a continuum. Well, how far do you get to chase the guy? How long after he takes your TV? Those things would be very, that's up for debate. But the basic principle, if a guy takes your TV and runs away, I think you're allowed to tackle him and get your TV back. Yeah. I don't think that would violate the delegation of rights to retaliatory force.
Okay. So I think this still is incompatible with property rights. In a very specific way, because I agree with Kinsella on his theory of estoppel, and I may be somewhat idiosyncratic, not exactly agreeing with him on the specifics, because I think you actually own the right to retribution. If somebody, let's just take punching, somebody punches me in the face, I therefore own the right to retribute against them, which is punching them back. So I could do that at any point in the future. I own that right now. The problem with then saying, oh no, the government, they are the only ones who are allowed to retaliate, then I no longer have that right. So it's still incompatible with the non-aggression principle, which I establish on objectivist grounds.
Okay, so I disagree, but we'll get to that. I just wanted to make sure that we knew exactly what it is that about which we're disagreeing. So would you agree with me that if a given action rises to such a risk that even if it doesn't necessarily violate the rights of somebody, the risk of it doing so would warrant its preclusion from society or from human arrangements? What I mean is like this. I can fire a gun out my window right now. It might not hit anybody. It might not hit anybody's property, but there is such a risk that it will hit somebody. I think it's warranted to ban such conduct. Similarly with drunk driving, I think if somebody is absolutely plastered driving down the street, they may not hit anybody, but there's such a risk that they will, that it warrants prohibiting it. Would you disagree with that or agree with it?
I would disagree with the principle, but not necessarily the example. So I don't think there are any exceptions to the non-aggression principle. I don't think there's anything which is innocent and you're still allowed to prohibit it. I think the prohibition, the prevention through like aggressive means of anything innocent is itself a crime. It's because I count all aggression as a crime. But I think that if you're firing a gun randomly and you just so happen to be missing the person across the street, you're still aggressing against them. In my view, you're still initiating a conflict over the use of their property. Yes, if you're putting someone at risk, it's not that. Well, it's just so risky that we've got to prohibit it anyway. It is this amount of riskiness. However you want to quantify that. And it's also an aggression. So that's why you're allowed to prohibit it, not because it's really risky.
See, my defense of minarchism would be this. And it's based on the basic idea that we just talked about. That assuming you have a government that all it does is protect rights, right? It doesn't tax, it doesn't do any of those things. It just protects rights. I understand that no government like this has ever existed. But I also understand that in order for such a government to exist, the bulk of the population would have to accept the idea. But that's true of any liberty-based philosophy needs that. Whether it's going to be anarcho-capitalism, minarchism, whatever, we're going to have to convince people to accept it.
Yes, ominous parallels.
So, right. So if we've got an organization already that is protecting rights, and that doesn't necessarily preclude all other organizations that protect rights, because you might have a situation where you have, bodyguards, self-defense agencies, security guards, whatever that do the same thing, but they don't compete with the main organization. Is that if you've already got rights protected and then you have an organization that wants to rise up, the risk of that organization in turn leading to rights violations is so high that I would say it's justified in excluding it from developing.
Well, I think it's,
and as we go, I'll show why, but go ahead and you can respond.
Yeah, I think it's just prima facie kind of absurd to think, okay, well, either we have a bunch of to be clear, I don't think anarcho-capitalism describes some specific bureaucratic structure. I think it's a theory of what the law is. But let's just say two possible scenarios. We've got a world of 10,000 Liechtensteins, right? Just tiny little things, and you can vote with your feet. You can go all over the place. Maybe we even have like an Iceland, medieval Iceland type situation where they don't even have a certain territory. They're just kind of like firms that you can buy into, and they're kind of geographically situated based on like where their headquarters is and whatnot. That world versus a world where one guy gets to decide what the law is, and he's Superman, so he can just enforce whatever laws he wants, right? Which one do we think is more likely to result in rights violations? And I would say it's clearly when you've only got one agency up at the top and all you got to do is convince this agency that rights are no longer a good thing, and boom, you're done, right? You can't just go to a different guy.
Okay. Well, first I postulated an organization that was protecting rights, but here's my question. Are you for Hoppian covenant communities or Rothbardian competing defense agencies where you would have multiple agencies within a given geographic region?
Well, I don't think it's a choice. I don't think there's an alternative there. You can have both, right? It's like, okay. I'm not for restaurants as against grocery stores. I'm just have both of them, and then, you know, let it be up to the market. And if people want grocery stores, they can go start grocery stores and patronize grocery stores, right?
Okay, so with covenant communities, there's a strong argument that these are just governments, because you have a given geographical area. And what I mean by that is there's continuity from house to house, restaurant to restaurant. They're governed by the same rules, the same laws in a given area. That to me is basically indistinguishable from government. It's just of a smaller area. You have a government in this small area. But when it comes to competing defense agencies in the same geographical area, and what I mean by that is it's not continuous. So you have, 6 houses, in a row, and each has a different defense agency, or one defense agency, has a house here, then a house over here. And here's a couple problems with that, right? Suppose, for instance, you've got an 18-year-old guy and he's dating a 17-year-old girl. The 18-year-old guy's defense agency says that this relationship is perfectly lawful. The 17-year-old girl's agency says no, it's not. The two have sex. The girl's parents report this to their defense agency. They want the kid prosecuted. How do you resolve it?
Well, I don't think that these agencies are able to make the law. This is why I'm very clear. Maybe I haven't been clear enough here, or I say this elsewhere at least, that I'm very particular with the way I describe anarcho-capitalism. I don't describe it as this is a specific bureaucratic structure. We're going to have these defense agencies, and they're going to be like this and that and other things. Like, people like to play like, dress up in their minds about what the society will look like. That's fine, whatever. Okay. But I don't think they are making the law. I don't think you can have this is why I don't like David Friedman very much on this topic. I think he's poison. Where it's like, oh well, we're going to decide that 17 is the age of consent, and we're going to decide that 18 is the age of consent, and then we're just going to have to go to arbitration about it or whatever. I think there is an objective answer to any given legal dispute. One of them is correct, one of them is incorrect, one of them is the aggressor, one of them is innocent. If so long as you're cutting up what you're describing as the disputes sufficiently. Right, so you're not bundling together. There are people did a bunch of disputes against each other, and they're both aggressors in different ones. So the way you would resolve that, if we're actually in a situation where we've got some sort of conflict, the way you resolve that is, if you're a peaceful person, you go to arbitration and you try and sort out an arbitration. Hopefully you'll have agreed upon rules for what's okay within your community or whatever. If you don't, then all legal theory gives us is sort of a boundary, an outer boundary of what is permissible. And that boundary is the non-aggression principle. Anything within that, you can have all sorts of crazy systems of rules built up within there. That's fine, so long as everybody agrees to it, and there are specific ways that you have to be able to agree to things. But yeah, that is the answer there. You go to arbitration, and then they might still disagree with the arbitration, and you can keep going up, and there is no final arbiter. I agree, there's no final arbiter, and then they're left with fighting, right? That's the final stage. They're left with fighting, but the truth is they're always left with fighting, right? Having a final arbiter doesn't negate that they're left with fighting if they just can't agree. It's just now that there's also going to be a third party in here fighting, right? But you're still having fighting there.
Well, this is where Rothbard loses me, because Rothbard makes a similar argument. He says you're going to have a body of libertarian law that's going to govern, and then you have to have a final arbiter. But if you have a final arbiter, it seems to me, unless that final arbiter has the power to enforce its rulings, like I went to prison for 25 years, right? If I went to court and it was between me and the plaintiff bringing the charges, and even if I agreed to the arbitration, if that arbiter didn't have the power to lock me up, I'm not going to jail. It's that simple. I don't give a damn what I've agreed to, especially then. I was 21 years old and out of my mind. If you don't have an organization that's powerful enough to put me in prison, I'm not going. And I don't know how you get that if you've got all these different competing defense agencies. First of all, I don't know who is enacting the larger body of law and who's going to be the arbiters or the Supreme Court or whatever you want to call it. But if you have them and they have no power, what the hell do I care? And I'm just some 5'8", 175-pound dude. I mean, you have criminal organizations out there that would never listen. John Gotti certainly never goes to prison in that scenario.
Right. But like, it's never going to be the case that the final arbiter is like some sort of a magician or whatever. He can just wave his magic wand and make sure that everybody obeys the NEP, right? There are no guarantees. Like the man-made is not immutable, right?
No.
There's always choices, and you could always escape jail or evade your capture or whatever it is, right? There are never going to be any guarantees, and very simply, that fact that there are no guarantees, that sometimes you're going to be left with fighting, that doesn't justify the state. And also, if we're going to allow postulations that we've got this rational society where everybody is like everybody's walking around in their John Galt, right? If we're going to allow that for the minarchist case, why not allow it for the anarchist case? Why are we assuming suddenly that everybody's always going to be fighting? Right?
Because I never postulated that everybody would be rational. I postulated a state. What I'm saying is what I would argue for is a minarchist government that has a monopoly on retaliatory force over a given jurisdiction, that all it does is protect rights. Now, I agree that that's never taken place, but it has been somewhat approximated. Now, it's true as a historical fact that it's grown, in the case of the United States, way beyond anything that was ever intended. That doesn't mean that that's a necessary consequence of government, that there's nothing inherent in the concept that necessitates it growing. That's a function of the populace and what the populace will allow. But that's going to be the case in any political system, whatever it's going to be, how the majority of the population, or at least the majority of those with passion behind them. Because obviously, if you have 70% that are just completely apathetic and 30 people that are, into it, those 30 are going to hold sway. But unless you're able to convince people, you're never going to have anything. So you're never going to get your type of system. But that's why I'm arguing for the minarchist government that I am. But it's no more utopian than or unrealistic than an anarcho-capitalist society. And I'm not saying anarcho-capitalist is utopian, because I think it's the same thing. You have to, in order to try this, you've got to convince enough people to go for it.
Right, so I think even if you have a rational state, I'm sure we would agree on this, if the broad population out there are all, irrational, then it's not going to be able to enforce anything. It's weak, right? And the same is true for these security agencies within Anarcho-Capitalism, whatever you might want to call it, right? In both cases, if you have like a broad majority of people are all raving irrationalists, then you're going to have a lot of problems out of that. And if the broad society is highly rational, in either case, then you're not going to get that problem. You're not going to have these competing firms where they can't agree and they're going into constant wars and all that sort of stuff. If this guy is trying to evade capture and evade punishment for his crimes, then just go to your local like bounty hunter or whatever. Say, hey, I'll give you $500 if you can get that guy back and get me my stuff back. Or beforehand, if you're planning ahead, then you'd buy insurance for your property. You'd insure your property, and then the insurance firm's going to go after him with the goddamn hammer of Thor, and way more efficiently than a monopoly would, because we don't have the economic calculation problem anymore.
If all I had to contend with were bounty hunters, I'm okay with that. Let's have it. But not now. I'm saying, but back then, the whole point was I knew once I was, because I made a choice to go to court. I was on my way to court, and I knew, okay, if I run, they're going to find me. There's no getting away from that. Not only that, but they've got officers in every county and every state that will hunt me down, and I have nothing. Even if I got all my friends together, we're not competing against them. But in the case of an anarcho-capitalist society, first of all, competition, like you said, is very efficient. But there's nothing in that situation to stop a defense agency from arising that protects criminals. I mean, that's exactly what the mafia is. So if you have the mafia, and the mafia is then competing just with defense agencies rather than with the United States government, you've got a serious problem on your hands. And I don't know how you solve that.
Well, you solve it, again, by having the correct philosophy in place. If you have the correct philosophy in place, then you're not going to get these criminal defense agencies popping up, which is the same for the state. It's the same always, right? I think you're maybe underestimating just how powerful these free market firms could be. You're saying, well, if I just have to deal with bounty hunters, that's fine, I'll just evade them. What if these bounty hunters have like fucking, space lasers that they can just instantly find where you are and boom, and you're dead, right? You're not going to be able to evade them if they're way more efficient than the government.
But here's the thing. If they're that powerful, then what is the superiority of that over your powerful state?
Because they're competing. They can allocate means efficiently, and they're not doing criminal things. So then
it's not actually about protecting rights in that scenario. It's about allocating means efficiently. Because if they're that powerful and you don't have somebody to protect you that's more powerful, what's to stop them from violating your rights?
Well, they got that powerful by not being criminals, by not being savage brutes, right? That's how they got so powerful. John Galt, I won't spoil anything for people who haven't read the book, but he was definitely by the end way more powerful than the government, and he got that powerful by actually being a moral guy. That's how he was able to do all the things he did and invent the crazy stuff that he did, right? If you have an actual free market defense firm, they are going to be orders of magnitude. Like if we look at desert savages are able to repel the most powerful military we've ever seen on planet Earth, right? And you know why that is? Because that most powerful military we've seen on planet Earth, they're spending trillions of dollars on stuff they don't need. Like, you'll see these demonstrations in like the U.S. cabinet or whatever it's called, right? Where they'll hold up like a bag of nails, and it's like, this bag of nails the U.S. military paid $100,000 for. It's like,
I don't way inefficient with that, but I do disagree that that's why they can't beat the desert gatherers, because if they wanted to, they could. I mean, just as a matter of pure fact, if we wanted to take out the Taliban when we were fighting Afghanistan, we could have wiped out the whole country. The problem is there's moral considerations that stop them, at least considerations of the morality of the populace and the global population who wouldn't go for it. They certainly had the ability to wipe them out.
The global population
certainly had the ability.
The global population was way going for wiping out the Taliban.
Hold on. The global population would not have stood for us nuking Afghanistan. They wouldn't. That is just not true. They would not have gone for that. They hullabaloo every time civilians get killed. Now, if you were to just wipe out the country, they would have never went for that.
Okay, so you're.
What I'm kind of. Go ahead. I want to let you respond. I'm not gonna.
Sure. So I don't think the correct idea of really cutting edge military is, let's blow them all up. Screw it. I think that's A, highly inefficient, and B, doesn't actually work, right? It's gonna create way more enemies than you actually need to be creating here. I'm saying that they can't actually go in and take out the enemy that needs to be taken out without creating 50 more enemies all around them.
Well, I don't disagree with that necessarily. I just disagree with the idea that the reason they don't beat the particular people they're fighting is because they're inefficient, because they could.
Well, that's at least one reason, right? There might be other reasons.
So, the thing that I'm having a problem with under this system is, in the United States, we have a government, right? So the Congress passes laws. Let's say it's a law to raise revenue. This law initiates in the House, goes to the Senate, then it goes to the president, he signs it into law. Then the executive branch of the government is responsible for enforcing that law. In the case of the anarcho-capitalist society, what organization is responsible for enacting and promulgating the laws that you're talking about that are going to govern all the agencies?
Well, it's a lot like asking, well, in a free market, who produced the bread? Like, this is an old joke. Like, two guys in a Soviet bread line, they've been waiting for hours, and it's like, oh my God, I can't believe we have to wait hours for stale bread. Other guy turns to him and is like, you think this is bad? In capitalism, they don't even have bread lines, right? It's like, under anarcho-capitalism, what system would we have to produce food? System would we have to produce airplanes? It's the same question. What system would we have to produce rights enforcement? You just leave it up to the market. Let the market decide, right? And the market's going to find the most efficient way. If I could tell you right now, okay, here's the exact structure we're going to have, and we're going to have all these little doodads, then I would be omniscient. I would be able to be a central planner. And as we know, central planning isn't possible. And nobody, not even Ayn Rand, was able to centrally plan a government, her system. It still falls afoul of the economic calculation problem. She can't tell you how much defense there should be for each individual. She can't. It's not possible.
No, but there's a difference between having general laws that are applicable to everybody in a geographic area in a loaf of bread that I can choose to go buy or not buy. There's a difference, and the bread maker is also competing with other bread makers. But you're in this situation. If you're going to have, you're saying there shouldn't be a monopoly on force, but you are saying there's going to be a monopoly on lawmaking.
No. There isn't going to be lawmaking. Because I don't think men make laws.
Where's this law? What's the law that these organizations are obeying?
It's in the same way that there isn't ethics making. Like nobody's there saying, okay, these are what the ethics proper principles of ethics are, and I'm producing these proper principles of ethics. Right? It's just already, those are the proper principles of ethics, and you have to go out in there and discover them, right? But you don't have to, nobody's there producing them. It's the same thing with law. The proper principles of law are already there, and, I've discovered them, and other people have discovered them, right? You just have to go out there and discover them, right? They're already there.
There's so much disagreement over it, and that's kind of the whole point.
Well, there's always disagreement.
Well, there is, but there is. But when you have a monopoly on force, it doesn't matter. A monopoly on retaliatory force, it doesn't matter whether I disagree or not. I can disagree till I'm blue in the face. They've got the monopoly, but you're talking about competing defense agencies. And if these competing defense agencies disagree about what these laws are, then you've got the problem that I gave you with the 18-year-old and the 17-year-old. Or you're going to have it in regard to what if one agency accepts IP, the other agency doesn't, one guy takes the IP from a guy and another, then what do? How do you resolve it?
We're moving away now from the postulation.
No,
hold on. We're moving away now from the postulation that this was a society which is generally accepted objectivism, right? Correct philosophy. Right?
No, I didn't say that.
Well, hold on.
I didn't postulate that.
I
never postulated
hold on. What if the government then disagrees over what is the correct way to do things? Then you have a civil war, right? You can have that in both systems.
You definitely will. You definitely can. All I'm saying is if you have an agency strong enough that it has a monopoly over retaliatory force and that agency protects rights. It doesn't have to be acceptance necessarily that the majority accept objectivism. You could have people that in the society that just accept the NAP. They might accept argumentation ethics. They might accept John Locke. They might accept the rights defense as a result of utilitarianism. But they agree that the function of government is to do this. That's what you would have to convince them of. Now you're talking about a situation where you're going to have multiple defense agencies. So even if you had, say, the 2/3 of the population were objectivists, if you had another third that were socialists and they're allowed to start up their own defense agency and they radically differ as to the law, and you don't have any promulgated laws, you're going to end up with a serious problem, whether it be with IP, whether it be with the statutory rape or an abundance of other things, whether it could be fraud, it could be statute of limitations. In statute of limitations, by the way, that's not necessarily a rights violation thing, or how you get due process. Do you have to have a lawyer? Does the state have to provide a lawyer for you? Can they take your property without your consent as in eminent domain? There's a whole abundance of laws that people need to know ahead of time in order to know how to act properly. And if you're just saying everybody has to discover them, well, that's just going to lead to chaos. That's why you need a written constitution and a written criminal code.
It won't necessarily
and a written civil code too.
I don't see why on earth. I don't see why on earth that would necessarily lead to chaos at all. You're going to have chaos. Like I think Binswanger in one of the videos, I watched some lectures on politics a while back from the Objectivists. Binswanger says, well, when Ayn Rand witnessed this when she was in Crimea, right? It was one day the flag would go up, and it was the Red Army had it, and another day the other flag would go up, and you had to look at which flag was up at which point to know which laws you're under, and that's why anarchy doesn't work, and that's why anarchy is chaos. No, that's because this was a horribly irrational society, right? If you have a broadly rational society, then you're not going to have these things. You're going to have rational people who understand already, right? Everybody already understands the basics of the NEP, and they evade it constantly, right? But it's already out there. They already understand this stuff. It's not rocket science. And if you have, you brought up the example, well, what if you have 25% socialists in your Ancapistan, right? If you have 25% of your population is socialist anywhere, that's going to be a huge problem. That's a big problem. And this is one reason why, you should all move to New Hampshire. Go to New Hampshire, concentrate in New Hampshire, and then you have, you defend against socialists, because the socialists don't want to go there.
But it wouldn't be as big of a problem if you had an organization strong enough to stop them.
Sure. So pay for insurance. So put your money where your mouth is, pay for insurance, and then they can bomb the socialists if need be.
But if there's all these competing agencies that none of them rises up to have that kind of power, then a 25% block is far more significant than if you have one central government that's doing that.
That's not at all true. Hold on. It's a general rule of economics that competing firms will tend to be way more efficient than a monopoly, right? So if you have the 75% monopoly, that's going to be way less efficient than the 75% competing firms. And they can join up, they can coalesce together, and then send in strike teams to kill off the socialists. Right, and Standard Oil wasn't a monopoly. Standard Oil was not a monopoly.
No, because there wasn't barriers to entry.
Okay,
I grant you that, but I'm saying they were a very, very large. What I mean is there weren't a lot of competing firms. Right, they were a dominant firm. They had about 90% market share.
And it went down. By the way, it went down to 60% by the time the antitrust laws came in. So they were falling.
But they still had a very large portion. Even if it's 60, even if it was just 40, it's huge. But my point is they were efficient. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about general efficiency here. I'm talking about protection of rights and what is the best way to do it. Efficiency might be cheaper, might be streamlined, whatever. But if you have competition, then there's also going to be firms that'll rise up to protect bad guys, because that's what competition produces. There's different services for different people. There's no reason that an organization wouldn't rise up that's powerful enough to protect bad guys, as in the case of the mafia, which arises even in our society. Even when there is a powerful government, they're just not powerful enough to compete with it.
Doesn't that throw a little red flag up in your mind when you say, like, oh yeah, even if we have this monopoly, then these bad guys can pop up and do their bad stuff? Like, yeah, bad guys can always pop up.
No, it doesn't put a red flag, and I'll tell you why. Because first of all, the government that we have is far more inefficient than the government that I'm talking about, because they try to do everything. Right. They're not just limited to protecting rights. They're trying to do everything. But secondly, the mafia doesn't actually compete with them. The mafia is limited in scope of what it can accomplish. It's still, you're never going to eliminate all crime under any system of government. I don't care what you do. It's a matter of the extent in how much they're allowed to compete, or how much they're allowed to wreak havoc on society. And again, in the case of IP, people even that accept NAP, even that accept objectivism, disagree over intellectual property. Rational people can disagree, and that's a significant area of law. And if you don't have it published, and you've got one agency that protects it and another agency that doesn't, you're going to end up with significant clashes.
Yeah,
because I'm going to demand that you protect my rights and get me my money, because this guy violated my right to intellectual property. His agency is absolutely going to defend him. And then you end up with violence. And those agencies that are defending intellectual property, they're the bad guys in that situation. And that's a bad thing. That's your position. But my only point is that rational people can disagree. Rational people can draw different conclusions on specific areas like that. And if it's not published ahead of time, then people don't know how to behave. And that's what leads to violence, especially when each one has an agency that's protecting it. So we kind of protecting him or her.
We're kind of in this area of, okay, well, what is the best way to defend these rights? So we can presume for now that we have already established some sort of objective legal theory. We already understand what the law is. What is the best way to enforce that? And it's like, I don't think that if you have a monopoly, then you face the economic calculation problem. So in your minarchist state, how much defensive rights are they providing to each individual? Is it like an armed guard on each street corner? Are they having tanks roving down the streets? Are they just giving everyone handguns so they can do it themselves? Like, how much rights protection should there be produced?
Well, when you say the economic calculation problem, I want to know specifically what you mean. I know, and it's no disrespect to you. I just don't know how well you understand it. You may understand it perfectly well. I just want to make sure that if we're going to get into marginal utility and subjective valuations, that we're on the same page. So when you are talking about the economic calculation problem, what exactly are you referencing?
Sure. So basically the economic calculation problem says that, well, if you have a single will directing the factors of production, then you can't trade those factors. So you can't get factor prices, which means that you can't do any calculations of input costs versus output profits, right? You can't do that calculation.
Okay.
So then means are being misallocated.
Okay. You get it. I just wanted to make sure. Like I said, I don't mean any disrespect. I've just never discussed it with you, so I don't know. So I'm not even going to disagree that a minarchist government would face that problem. Kind of. It still would know prices of various materials to make, say, police cars. Like, you would still know the cost of automobiles, cost of tires, cost of guns, all that sort of thing. Now, how many police and all that? I'm not claiming there wouldn't be inefficiencies. What I'm claiming is that those inefficiencies wouldn't be as harmful to individual rights as would be, or to the overall chaos that would ensue as would result from anarcho-capitalism. And let me give you an example. So if we've got our different competing defense agencies, right, and you and I are walking down the street together, and we witness a crime occurring, a guy's beating up some guy, down the street. Who do we call? Do we call my defense agency? Do we call your defense agency? Do we call the property owner's defense agency, who we may not know, or the guy who's getting beat up, his defense agency? How do we know whom to call? Because my defense agency isn't likely to be paying to be coming to defend everybody else. They're there to defend me and the people that pay them, not the people that don't. So whom do we call in that situation, and how do we know?
Sure, this seems like a great opportunity for some entrepreneur to go, hey, Mr. Community over here, I'll set up a nice 911 line for you, and people just call 911, and that's real easy, and then they can get the relevant defense agency will be sorted out in the background, and they'll be sent in, and it'll all be sorted out. In the same way, you could do the same with pizza. Call 992.
Well, who's going to pay for that, though? Who's going to pay for that general defense that you're talking about? Well, if it's provided generally, then why would I pay for it somewhere else? Well, if I know that if I'm somewhere and I'm going to get attacked and I can just call the 911 number that you're talking about, then why in God's green earth would I hire a defense agency?
So there have been many situations in the past where, a bunch of businesses are set up somewhere and they're like, you know what, we probably get more foot traffic if we had a road here. So what they do is they set up a company, and that company builds the road and it runs the road and everything. And then you could do the same with 911 calls. This is the idea behind covenant communities, right? You can have some general idea of what's going on in this area. You know what the emergency number is in this. I mean, even right now, your phone automatically corrects the emergency services number to the correct emergency services number for the area you're in, right?
Right. And you're assuming right there that there's this is kind of my point, Zulu, is that I don't know, do you go by Liquid or Zulu? I don't even know, or just Liquid.
Zulu's Zulu.
Fine. I'm not really sure. Zulu. Okay. Is that if I know that in a given geographic area, I can call 911, and I'm assuming this is going to be wherever I go, why would I hire my own personal defense if I can just call this number? Why am I going to pay twice? If I'm not paying for this general defense, in which case you suffer the free rider problem, or I am paying for it, in which case, why am I going to pay somebody else? And then you end up with, okay, well, then you just have a police force that governs a given geographic area. And I don't know how that differs from government.
Sure. So if we have this sort of situation where you want to be like a free rider or whatever, and you call them up and you say, hey, this guy, some guy took my TV, and they might just go, our records show that you don't actually pay us any money, so pay us money and then we'll go and get him, right? They can just refuse services to you.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes sense. It makes sense for them to show up at least.
Sure. So, but if I'm paying them already, well, then why am I paying a separate defense agency? And if there's not a separate defense agency, how does that differ from government?
If you have already got insurance on your property, then just call up. If somebody's attacking you or whatever, call up your insurance.
No. Remember the example I gave? You and I are walking down the street and we notice in the distance that there's a crime being committed. Somebody's being attacked. And I asked you, how do we know what agency to call? And you responded by saying, well, there's going to be a general agency for that area.
There could be.
And what I'm saying, okay, but if there isn't, then we're back to square one. Who do we call? Whom do we call? And if there is, I don't know how that differs from government, because you then have one agency in a given area that's protecting everybody.
So let's
and if there's multiple, by the way, let me just say, if there's multiple, and then you're going to have the problem of redundancy or even competing. If I call, you call, but then what if one of those guys calls his and he says he's being attacked, and then they all show up, and now you've got another problem on your hands.
So let's say I'm wanting to advertise some security enforcement services to you. And I say, hey, whatever crime you see, call us up and we'll sort it, right? And then isn't that a great selling point? That we'll just sort it for you, and you can just call us up and we'll sort it all in the background. We'll sort out the bureaucracy. Yeah. We'll figure out who's supposed to go where. Is that not?
Yeah, but why would, clearly you want to pay for all that? Why would I pay for all that?
Clearly, this is a service you want because you're so concerned about it, right? So clearly, you do want that service.
Not necessarily enough to pay for it, especially because I know the chances of me witnessing a crime like that are slim.
What if that type of service costs you 1 penny for every 100 years that you have access to it? Okay,
then you have this issue. Okay. I call this agency that I have. Somebody else that witnesses the crime has the same service. They call their agency. Somebody else has their agency. And then let's say the attacker in that situation, he has his agency. So he sees the other agencies come. First of all, they don't know who's who because they're not all on the same team. And that guy calls his agency and says he's the one being attacked. Then what do you do? When you have multiple agencies are going to show up. That's the first thing. None of them know whom the others are. And one of them is there to protect the bad guy.
Yeah, if
you have just one agency, you don't have this problem because they all wear a uniform, they show up, and anybody else that attempts to interfere gets in trouble.
Yeah, so if you're civilized people, what you do there is you talk out and you'd say, hey, I recorded on my phone, this guy he's the attacker. And then they go, oh, yeah, prima facie, you look like the attacker, bro. Let's take this to court. You know, why would his agency want to go to war to protect this delinquent guy who
he pays them a lot?
Okay, then
there's no reason that there's a demand for that.
Hold on, then you just have the situation of, well, what if a big mob of people, a big gang of people show up and they're all evil? But then we're, again, moving away from the presumption that this is a generally rational society.
But those people aren't specifically being called to intervene. If a mob of evil people shows up, you're talking about a scenario where it's a very realistic possibility that multiple people show up to stop this crime from occurring, and a possibility that one group shows up to protect the guy that's committing the crime. That's a very real possibility. There's nothing in this society you're talking about to exclude criminals from hiring a defense agency. There's nothing.
Hold on. There's nothing under your system to prevent just a big gang of criminals getting together and doing awful things.
Sure there is. Yes, there is.
What is there?
There's a central authority that is there to stop that from happening.
How does having a central authority, is this like a magic spell that they can cast and then suddenly nobody's able to form a big mob of criminals and hurt people?
But when you have an organization, let's say the mafia, and they're committing crimes and they're growing, then a government can say, this is a rights violating organization. Let's break it up. Let's get in there. Let's stop it from happening.
Okay, I want to know what would prevent all these other firms, and they're saying, hey, this is clearly a delinquent group of people. They're awful people. Let's go in there and let's sort them out. Let's stop them from doing their activities, their criminal activities. What prevents that?
Well, nothing would prevent it. But if
There you go.
No, I don't. Listen, if you have, so if that's what's going on, if you have a bunch of this is what I don't get. If you've got a bunch of coordinating agencies all operating under one group of law, under one, constitution, let's say, right? I don't know how that differs from government, from the exact government I'm talking about. They're going to coordinate with one another to protect rights. They're operating under one set of rules. How is that not government?
Because there's competition. I mean, you may want to call it government. Some people use the word government to mean any sort of governance going on, whatever. Fine. But it's definitely not a state because it's not a monopoly, right? It's competing.
Okay, so you have these competing agencies. And then you have the possibility, of course, that one agency is better than the rest. And then that agency does what Robert Nozick says and becomes the bigwig on the planet. That's not an argument against anarcho-capitalism. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying, well, it kind of is. It's an argument against its practicality, but it's not an argument against its inefficiency.
So let me ask you this.
Also, I believe what Geloso says too. I'm not positive because my memory's not serving me.
Let me ask you this. If there is surely one best restaurant in the world. They have the best food, the best service, everything.
Sure.
Why is that restaurant not the only restaurant?
Because they don't have guns. That's why.
Why does guns change anything?
No, but we're talking specifically about agencies of defense, agencies that are armed, agencies that use violence. You're not talking about simply a restaurant. It's a different thing.
When I go to an agency to defend my rights, what I'm looking for is the service of defending my rights. When I go to a restaurant, I'm looking for the service of getting nice food and all that stuff. What is the disanalogy here?
What is the disanalogy is that one group is using force and the other isn't. But why is that? One person is cooking pork and the other is cooking vegetables. Because force is different in kind than cooking vegetables. You're talking about why is it different? I don't know. What's the difference between eating a steak and getting punched in the face? It's a big difference. Okay, what's the difference between eating steak and launching a rocket? It's a big difference again. But what is the disanalogy? Because, well, first of all, when someone launches a rocket at you, you're not voluntarily No, you're just launching a rocket. You're just a rocket company and you launch rockets. If I'm launching the rocket, I mean, why am I just launching a rocket? I don't Maybe understand. You want to go mine asteroids or go to the moon or whatever. Right? There are all sorts of different things. But then I'm not using force. There's no force involved. But why is using force? Why is that like the thing which makes a difference? What is the disanalogy there? Because force is the only thing that can violate individual rights. That's why. And given that force can violate individual rights, and given that the only appropriate use of force is self-defense, you need to figure out what is the best, least risky way where you can establish an agency or agencies that can use force in defense of individual rights. The problem, though, I mean, honestly, in all of this is the main problem that I'm having is with the overarching body of law. Because if you have an overarching body of law that everybody's ascribing to, I don't know how that differs from government other than you have different agencies in charge of enforcing it. But then I don't know how you don't run into the problem of these different agencies misinterpreting it. So this is an objective law, to be clear. This isn't being made by these people. I mean, we can maybe go into that a little bit if you're wanting it. I think this objective standard of law is already established in philosophy. And I think it's always applies whenever there's multiple people. Would you agree with that? Can you repeat it so I can make sure I'm getting it? Formulate that again for me. So like, let's say we have Crusoe and Friday on the desert island. They haven't formed any states or anything like that. Do they have rights? Yes. Okay. Well, then we have moved away from Ayn Rand because we no longer need a state to create the law, right? The law is already a thing before the state's been formed. No. There's a difference between law and rights, depending on what you mean by law, ultimately. There are rights because I still have the right to self-defense in that situation. But rights are the very thing upon which you base the laws that you make. So it's not the exact same thing. In what sense are you basing the law
on rights? Like, is it a logical implication situation?
No,
or
because
is it just, I want this to be the law?
No. What I'm saying is this. If we have rights, say I have the right to self-defense, the right to property, right? And now you come to me, let's say, right? And you say, listen, it's easier if we agree that I protect your rights and you protect my rights, basically collective self-defense against anybody that, encroaches upon us. So let's agree. So then we say, okay, that's an agreement, and then we make a rule. And if everybody else, people that come and live in our area, and we tell them, listen, this is how we operate. There's rules against doing these things. So those would be laws. Now, you may argue that laws aren't necessary. I'm just saying that laws and rights are not the same thing. Laws are there to protect rights, to codify rights. But I think the rights antecede laws.
So I would say the law in general, that just says what people's rights are, what people are allowed to do, right? So on the desert island, there are certain things that Crusoe is allowed to do with respect to Friday and vice versa. I don't think you need a government to say, oh, Crusoe is allowed to make these sorts of contracts and all this sort of stuff. It's all implied by the non-aggression principle.
Okay, well, I looked up law just now. And law is defined as a system of rules which a particular country or community recognizes as regulating the actions of its members and which it may enforce by the imposition of penalties. Definition 2 is a rule defining correct procedure or behavior in a sport. So that would not be it. So ultimately, I guess it's going to come down to then how we're defining laws. And if you're saying that there's going to be recognized rights that all these agencies are going to recognize, that to me it's basically law. But if it's not published, it's hard for me to see how each agency is going to recognize the same rights.
Well, don't worry, it's been published in my course, so people can just go there, I suppose.
Nice plug. I like that. That was good. But even if it is okay, but then you've got published law. Then we're going by Zulu's rules of procedure in society.
I'm not making this law.
No, you're saying that you've discovered them, or somebody else discovered them, and you came across them and agreed with them. I get that. But the fact that they are discoverable doesn't mean everybody's going to discover them. It doesn't mean everybody is going to agree with them. And in my case, you only need a passionate minority or a slight majority who's going to agree to the overarching society. But in this case, where everybody can secede and everybody can go find their own agency, it seems to me you're going to end up with multiple agencies, even under the best of circumstances, that aren't going to recognize these laws. And if you don't have an enforcement system, you have an issue.
I don't see why, if we're assuming best of circumstances, then all these agencies would indeed recognize the objectively equal.
I'm talking about the best of realistic circumstances, like something that I think can actually occur. I don't think it's possible that you're going to have every single, human being is going to agree to the same thing, or that most people are going to occur to the same thing. Now, if you're going to if the postulate here is that everybody in the community is in Galt's Gulch, where everybody agrees to the same rights and the same ethics, then I agree with you. Then there's no more to discuss, because I'd be fine with it. If everybody just agrees, that's cool. The problem is that to me crosses the bounds of being realistic. Even in my scenario where everybody agree, well, not everybody, but a majority agrees government is to protect rights. What did I just do? Are you still seeing me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's just on my screen. I don't know. Okay, as long as you're seeing me, I suppose it doesn't matter.
So, I think there is a division of labor.
I just want to be clear, is that because I'm saying that these government will protect rights doesn't mean everybody agrees on the same philosophy. It just it means that a good amount of people agree on the type of government. In the scenario you're talking about, you're going to need even the people, you can't have large minorities disagreeing, because they're just going to go form their own agencies who aren't going to be governed by that. Okay, I got rid of it.
So, yeah, it's always going to be the case that if you have a large group of people in some area, they could go off and do their own thing. Yeah. And I think there is something perhaps missing here from this analysis.
Okay.
That there's a division between what the jurist is doing and what the judge is doing. The jurist is out there discovering objective principles of law, and the judge is there to apply those principles of law, right?
Okay.
It was already objective, and the jurist is figuring out what the law is, right? So these agencies, which might employ judges and whatnot, they are not coming up with the law, right? They are not, they are just applying it. So it doesn't make sense to say, if we have this free market system, proper Anarcho-Capitalism or whatever, that they would be coming up with different laws. It seems like you're attacking David Friedman's position there, which I disagree with. I don't think David Friedman is correct. I think there's already an objective standard of law, just as there's an already objective standard of like basically everything else, anything else evaluative, that is, right? So this law is, and again, like all philosophy is here to do on this issue is say what the law is, right? And that's why I'm holding this as a philosophical system, that if we have objectivism, then we have the non-aggression principle, which means do not initiate conflicts. Initiating conflicts is bad, and a conflict means mutually exclusive actions, right? So if we have Crusoe and Friday on the desert island, Crusoe pulls a stick out of nature, and he fashions it into a spear, and he's going to the ocean to spearfish, and then Friday comes along and tries to pull that stick off him. We have mutually exclusive actions here. We have a conflict, because Crusoe can't spearfish at the same time that Friday stokes his fire or whatever he wanted to do with the stick, right? That is the basis of law, in my view. And then you can build up everything you see in Austrian legal theory from just this core.
Austrian legal theory? You mean objectivist legal theory?
Well, I don't think the objectivists have a legal theory. If it is there, it's very, very primitive. It's Murray Rothbard primarily who came up with this legal theory. And then he was also, other people have come in and they've come up with other stuff in this legal theory.
See, I'm sorry, I just wouldn't call it Austrian legal theory. I mean, it might be Rothbardian legal theory, but I wouldn't call it Austrian.
It's the Austrians who came up with it.
Well, it's some Austrians. I mean, I certainly don't think Mises and Hayek and Menger would have went along with it. Probably not Lockman and Mises either.
Because they didn't extend praxeology into law. Like, that is Murray Rothbard's innovation. He applied praxeology to law.
Constitution of Liberty.
I don't think Hayek is a particularly good jurist.
But he was Austrian, though.
Right, but
he's more prominent than Rothbard.
He was an economist, right? He was an Austrian economist, certainly. But
so Murray
Rothbard had the innovation, the genius to recognize, hey, this praxeology thing, we can apply it to law. We can apply it to legal analysis.
He also took a lot from objectivism.
Yeah, and that's why they marry together so well.
Well, but I don't know that they do. Now I had a question that I wanted to ask, and I don't remember it. Oh, well, what do you do in cases like the amount of jurors that have to sit on a jury, or things that aren't objective, like the statute of limitations on crime and non-crime? Well, that stuff. I mean, that's not just something that's objectively definable.
I would immediately disagree that those things aren't objective. If it's an actual area of law, then it is objective. You can figure it out, right? And I would say with a question like, well, how many jurors should we have deciding this? It's the same question as asking, how many steaks should the restaurant keep in their freezer? Right? It's however many are needed. Right, however many is good to have.
Yeah. Well, you can't know that, and you can't know, for instance, what's the proper punishment for
you can
assault.
You can know that.
What's the proper punishment for assault second degree? That's not discoverable. That's not objective. In that sense,
the general theory of punishment, which I go over in my course, by the way, is restitution plus retribution. This is Kinsell's idea of retribution. It is 2 eyes for an eye. So if somebody steals $5 from you, you can get that $5 back because you still own it. And you can also take $5 from them because you can retribute against them. So for an assault, it is whatever analogous assault that it's going to be. So if they did a big punch in your nose and broke your nose, then you're allowed to do the same to them. You're allowed to break their nose. right? That is what the theory of punishment has to say on the matter. We don't need some guy sitting in a room and he says, "Oh, I reckon 2 years in jail and a $500 fine is good." Like, how does he figure that out?
So you're with Rothbard that if I get into a fight with somebody and I break his ribs, then the court can punish me by having my ribs broken.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I would disagree on that. I don't think we have enough time to really get into that. I just kind of have one more question for you, and then you can ask me, a question or two before we wrap up. Retaliatory force. The whole thing started with the idea of, we were talking about whether we maintain our right to retaliatory force or we delegate it, right? In the case of these defense agencies, if you hire a defense agency, do you delegate your right to retaliatory force to them, or do you still hold it?
I don't know what it means to delegate a right, really.
They're
allowed to defend you on your behalf.
No, not defend. What I'm saying is, if you believe I've robbed your house, right, and you have a defense agency, do you maintain the right to come exact justice on me?
Yeah.
You do. Okay. Do you need to have a court of law find me guilty first?
No.
Or is you just believing it is enough?
No, not you believing it is enough. Whether it's true, that's the question.
Well, yeah, but the point is that in a criminal trial, it has to be proven that the person's done it. You have, standards of evidence. You have all types of factors.
That's a different layer to the question, right? It's not what is justified. It's can you prove that you're justified in doing this?
No, what I'm asking you is, if you go and attack the wrong person, you're clearly not justified.
Yeah,
that's why it's okay. So you think Johnny Penmanship has robbed your house? You have the right to retaliatory force. You go attack this dude. It turns out it's not him.
No, not because you believe. That's why I'm saying it's not because you believe it, right? This is just you're using a Cartesian doubt argument here. It's like, well, you might have made a mistake on whether he did rob your house, but that's Cartesian doubt.
No, it's not. Cartesian doubt is doubting whether knowledge is even possible.
No. That's a specific application of Cartesian doubt.
No, it's really not.
Hold on.
Because you're not omniscient.
Hold on. The general method of Cartesian doubt is taking doubt as the primary. It's saying, well, in that argument you gave there, you might have made a mistake, so therefore it's invalid, right? So if I say, hey, I'm justified in attacking this guy because he attacked me last week, and your rejoinder to that is, well, you may have made a mistake there. That isn't a rejoinder. It's meaningless. It's an epistemic null statement. It is,
because you're talking about
this is Cartesian doubt.
Physical.
Come on, man.
It's not. It really isn't. It really isn't.
So I might have made a mistake.
No, not just you might have made a mistake, but mistakes are made like that all the time. You're not omniscient.
This is so clearly Cartesian doubt.
No, it's so you believe you're omniscient?
No, this is so clearly Cartesian doubt.
Not. No,
oh my God.
So it's not. It really isn't. So you're saying that if you can make a mistake, you're not talking about making a mistake in your general conclusions. You're talking about going and using violence against somebody. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to use violence against somebody, you better be goddamn sure that you're correct. And all I'm saying is that if each individual in a given society gets to judge and gets to decide who has committed these crimes against them, not everybody's rational. Not everybody's going to use a high standard of evidence. And even if they do, they could still make a mistake. And you're talking about going out and using force against people.
Yes, I am.
I just want,
and it's the same thing across the board, right? When this guy decided to put this girder on the bridge here, well, he might have made a mistake, and people's lives are at stake. So we can't be having this. He might have made a mistake, so therefore knowledge is impossible. Like, this is the road you're going down.
No, totally different. It's totally different. I'm going to tell you why. Because before you building a bridge, you're doing measurements. You're making sure that the materials are possible. You're doing an investigation, basically, to assure that this bridge is built correctly. You're talking about a situation. A guy breaks in your house. He has a mask on, and he takes off. You haven't seen him. I come and tell you, hey, it was Johnny Penmanship that did it. Now, you're saying you were in your rights to go attack this dude.
No. Because that is poor evidence. That's just you saying, "Oh, it's Johnny Penmanship." But if I have evidence, if I have him on camera, and it's like, "Hey, that's Johnny Penmanship right there," I know that guy.
So you're agreeing that you need to have an appropriate amount of evidence before you go and use this
But
force.
what I'm disagreeing on is that you don't have to then present this evidence to a board of judges and see if they agree with it.
Yet. We have not gotten
right,
there
but
yet.
it's just to be clear. I'm just clarifying. That's where I'm disagreeing.
Okay,
with the middle
position. Here is the problem with that. Is that while you may rely on a high standard of evidence, a lot of people won't. And to have individuals on the fly deciding whom they can go use retaliatory force against is an extremely dangerous proposition. It's not going to lead to good results. It's certainly not going to lead to a rights protecting society. That's why you need to have objective rules of evidence that are promulgated so everybody knows and everybody's aware of what you're doing. In that situation, you're saying, no, I'm going to judge for myself. I'm going to know. Now, if all of it was you doing it for you, I would say, I don't care. If you judge that shooting dope or anything else is good for you, that's fine. But you're talking about using force against another human being in a situation where there's no way for him to know, for me to know, for anyone else to know if you're correct, because we haven't had a trial. We haven't had evidence presented, anything. You're just deciding. That's why we delegate the right of retaliatory force.
So you were saying there that we need to have objective rules of evidence that are promulgated. All right, so what you do is you study this thing called epistemology, and then you might publish a book called, I don't know, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. Just pulling a name out of my ass there. And that's how you'd have the objective rules of evidence that are promulgated. Boom, it's done.
Okay, and well, boom, it's done is fine, but we need to know that those rules are being employed when somebody's using force against somebody else. That's what rights protection is all about. Is
yes, and that's what the firms could do.
Rights violated.
Anybody could go about do this, and they're saying, "Hey, this guy's just crazy. He's just going around beating people because they look black or whatever, and he thinks that's sufficient evidence that they're criminal." Like, yeah, go and stop that guy. Go ahead, right? This is a question of what philosophy is prominent in this area. If it's a subjectivist philosophy, then yeah, you're going to have a bunch of crimes going on.
You're talking about after it's already been done. So now you go and do that to this dude. Now this dude says, "Fuck calling the police. I'm getting my boy."
Sure, there are rational people.
On these dudes.
There are always going to be irrational people.
There are
this is not a rejoinder.
People, but it is, because even in a situation where people are primarily rational, that doesn't mean they've studied all the rules of evidence. That doesn't mean they know all these things. That doesn't mean that their judgment isn't skewed. That's why you don't have one juror.
Then they should stop evading. They should stop evading. I don't know why it is. Hold on. I don't know why it is that you think that, let's just get 12 guys, just 12 random guys who know nothing about the case, bring them on, and they'll probably be rational. It's fine. Like, we'll just have democracy vote on it. Like, no, that's not how you figure things out.
I'm not necessarily saying that they should be 12 random guys, and they really aren't, because when you go through a jury trial, you do have voir dire where they go through a process where both the prosecutor and the defendant get to decide who sits on that jury. There is a process. And not only that, but the criminal defendant can choose to circumvent the jury process and go right to the judge who has. But that's even assuming that the system we have now is the correct one. I'm not necessarily even saying that. I'm just saying that to allow each individual to decide for himself when retaliatory force is appropriate rises to a level of the danger of rights violations that I don't think is acceptable, and I don't think most people would think is acceptable either.
Let's say John Galt somebody punched him in the face and then ran off, and then John Galt sees this guy next week and decides to enact retaliation against him. He decides to punch him. John Galt, clearly a very rational person, right? Would John Galt be committing an objective crime there?
I'm going to say that John Galt wouldn't do that. And I'm going to tell you why. Because John Galt would understand that eyewitness testimony is very,
John Galt's eyewitness testimony. He
doesn't matter. He still understands as a human being that he may misidentify some. What if the guy has a twin brother?
Cartesian doubt.
No, it's not.
He might have made a mistake, so therefore it's like let's say John Galt is like a brilliant investigator. Instead of being an inventor, he's an investigator. Like we have the John Galt of investigation.
Okay, so do you think that the entire legal system should be designed as if everybody's John Galt? Even if that were the case,
I'm not saying designed. Hold on. You said the legal system should be designed in such a way. Again, you designed the legal system in your course. I'm not talking about designing what bureaucratic structure should be set up.
Okay, so the legal system should be You're saying the legal system should be based on everybody being a John Galt.
It's not even a should be. I'm not saying there isn't an alternative with respect to the legal system. They're just, this is the law. John Galt.
You are arguing it should.
John Galt is indeed allowed to retaliate against people who have done crimes against him. He is allowed to do that.
Okay, let me say this. I'm not saying that it's because I may have been unclear in this. What I'm saying, I'm not saying people don't have a right to retaliatory force. What I'm saying that it's more efficient, it's better to prevent further rights violations if we give up that right to retaliatory force to a broader government, to somebody that has a monopoly on that retaliatory force, for the reasons that I've already stated, for the idea that not everybody understands proper evidence, to where if I go and retaliate, then they retaliate, you end up in a gang war, for the fact that there's different, you need to have objective law that's promulgated that people know. There's an abundance of reasons why I think that it should be delegated. I'm not saying that you don't have the right. I'm not saying John Galt would be unethical in doing that. What I'm saying is that for the governorship, for how a broader society is going to be governed, it's not a good idea to have it legal for John Galt to do that. And the reason is because I've known multiple sets of twin brothers that multiple people wouldn't be able to tell apart. It's not Cartesian doubt. It's the fact that you're talking about physical violence and the rules when you're going to use physical violence to everybody. What's the saying? It's the saying, I think it's from Carl Sagan, but I might be wrong, that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Well, extraordinary actions require extraordinary evidence. If you're going to use physical force against somebody, you better be damn sure that that's him.
Sure.
That's ultimately my point.
The general claim is we assume John Galt has enough evidence, and I'm saying he is indeed allowed to retaliate. It's just an objective fact. He is indeed allowed to retaliate against this person. And if we have established that, we already no longer have Ayn Rand's minarchism.
Hold on a second. But when you say allowed, what do you mean? I'm
saying per the objective legal code that I'm talking about here.
Okay.
It is not a crime.
He's not allowed. Then no, he's not allowed. Yes, it is a crime. By a legal code, because now you're talking about something that's codified. Why is it a crime? It's a crime because in order to, if you're going to have a society or a group of individuals, whatever you want to call it, living together, then you cannot have a situation where individuals are deciding for themselves when to go use force against other individuals. The risk is far too high. So when you say allow, I thought if you're just asking me in a simple, isolated instance, is a human being unethical for using retaliatory force? And no, in principle, no. But once you broaden this principle out and you apply it to an abundance of human beings living together, then the very risk principle that I introduced at the beginning, I know you disagreed with it, but I'm just telling you my thinking on this, is that the risk is so high of an abundance of rights violations taking place that yes, it's okay to preclude retaliatory force, especially when in the situation that we're talking about, it's not as if justice is going to go undone. Because there's laws in order, there's a system in place that to try, convict, and punish the person in that we're talking about. If there weren't such an organization, well, that's a different story altogether.
So, like, if we have it, then that on your view, it is objectively criminal for John Galt to retaliate in this situation, then we no longer can have the NAP. Right, we can no longer have the non-aggression principle anymore, which means we have some sort of negation of the non-aggression principle, which my proof shows necessarily devolves into the primacy of consciousness. And we can go over the proof right now if you want.
Wait a second. How does the NAP disintegrate in this scenario?
Because
how does it go to primacy of consciousness?
So, real quick, the reason why the NEP would no longer be holding here is because the NEP implies, through a long series of deductions, that you have estoppel, that you have the right to retaliate against people, that you have a right to enforce retribution. And the reason why any negation of the NEP necessarily, sorry, I'm just trying to sort out my notes here. It's not working. What the fuck? Oh, sorry, I was pressing the wrong button. So yeah, the reason why any negation of the NEP, any alternative system, falls into primacy consciousness, I can go over now. So we have this problem of law, right, where we have scarcity, which means that two people can't use the same thing at the same time for different means, right? We can have conflicts. So law poses the question, okay, well, how should men deal with these conflicts? And there are three possible answers you can have to that question. Either you have the law of the jungle, I call it, which just anything goes, do whatever you want, who cares, right? Or there's mixed law, which is like some sort of medium. Sometimes you can do what you want, sometimes you can't. All sorts of different legal systems fall under this. Or you have the non-aggression principle, right? Mixed law is just anything which isn't the NEP or the law of the jungle. The reason why the law of the jungle falls into primacy consciousness, it fails on other grounds, but specifically why it falls into the primacy consciousness is because it's just whim worship, right? It's just, this is justified because I feel like it is. I feel like this is justified, so it is. Which then relies on a whim epistemology, which then relies on the premise that your consciousness has primacy. It's I'm able to change reality because I feel like it, right? That one's easy enough. Mixed law is a little more difficult. If it's some sort of mixed law system, which is I can aggress in some sort of arbitrary situations that I just came up with, but not always, so it's not law of the jungle, then obviously that's still whim worship. It's still primacy of consciousness. But there are also all sorts of different types of mixed law systems. I've got 8 of them listed here, but I'm not going to list them out because it's just too long. And they reduce into sort of two basic forms, which is the class-based, which is, oh, this guy is in the preferred class, he's the proletariat, he's Aryan, whatever it is, and therefore he's allowed to aggress against the other class, which, is falsified on, there is no polylogism, but other than that, it's fine. Or the whim-based, which is, the king said that this is fine, so it's fine. Obviously the whim-based falls into primacy consciousness, but so does the class-based, because you're not having a universal norm for all these people. You're having some arbitrary distinction between class A and the complement of class A, right? It's, you can't, if you're operating upon rational principles, operating upon the premise that existence exists, then you're going to have a general rule for the entire set, for the entire concept, man as such has these rules which apply. Any negation of that, you're evading reality. You're pretending that Aryans are different to non-Aryans, that the proletariat are different to the bourgeoisie, or whatever it might be, right? And then our only option left is the non-aggression principle. So the non-aggression principle is the only rational legal principle.
Okay. That hasn't told me why precluding every individual from being able to initiate force, to use retaliatory force, is primacy of consciousness. Secondly, the non-aggression principle that's similar and very close to what Rand calls a non-initiation of force. But the estoppel theory has nothing to do with objectivism. That's Stephan Kinsella. And the objectivist epistemology is primarily inductive, not deductive. So you said you're going to deduce this from the NAP. In the case of the guy, if we have a government, let's say, they're not initiating force against John Galt, the hypothetical John Galt, or anybody else in this scenario. They're, in this case, using retaliatory force because he has gone and used force against somebody else. And that's barred because of the extremely high chance that if individuals get to decide for themselves whom to retaliate and in what fashion, you're going to have significant rights violations.
So that objectivist epistemology is primarily inductive, does not rule out deduction.
No.
Right? Both are
no,
fine.
No, it doesn't.
Because
I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying I just want to be clear that it's primarily inductive.
There's an analogy to be drawn here with metaphysics. Like metaphysics, all you're doing is deducing corollaries of the existence axiom. That's all you're doing in metaphysics on objectivism. And the same thing is true of law. all you're doing is deducing corollaries of the non-aggression principle. That's it, right? And
hold on. Hold on. Back up. I want to. Now we are going a little far afield from the discussion, but it's okay. But what did you say about deducing in metaphysics?
So in metaphysics, all you're doing is deducing corollaries of the existence axiom, the fact that existence exists. And Peikoff says something similar to this. I can bring it up, the exact quote. I believe I have it somewhere. Yeah, the essence of metaphysics, according to Objectivism, is the step-by-step development of the corollaries of the existence axiom. And that's from Leonard Peikoff in Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand.
And you're taking that those are deductions from the existence axiom?
Yeah. Like, okay, I mean, let's even take, like, the law of identity. That's just saying the same thing as the existence axiom, really. Right?
Yes, but it's not deduced from existence. And
hold on, there's another step beyond this. And we take the law of causality. That is deduced from the law of identity. It's all action is action event. Hold on, I can bring up.
It really isn't. He's not. I have the book in front of me. He is not going to say causation is deduced from identity.
He said it rests on 2 points.
It's all learned by induction from experience. The
primarily it's learned from experience, right? You experience existence exists, and then you can go on to deduce the law of causality as a corollary. Like, that's what it means to say it's a corollary of identity.
You're not deducing it. He's not going to say he's deducing it.
You may not say that, but he is.
Well, I disagree, because a deduction means once you know one thing, then you deduce what's automatically implied by it.
That's what it means to say it's corollary.
Because he's learning all these
readily
things.
Evident.
He says existence is identity.
Mm-hmm.
You learn them at the same time, basically.
Yeah.
Is that you learn them both. You're not deducing one from the other.
I didn't say you deduced identity from.
You said everything that is in metaphysics is deduced from the axiom of existence. That's what you said.
I'm saying the essence of metaphysics, according to Objectivism, is the step by step. I can't remember the exact wording he used.
He says development. You said deductions, and
okay,
I'm telling you
development,
it's not
deductions. What's the difference?
Well, deductions means that you're drawing particular conclusions from general truths, and that's not what he's doing.
Okay, so how is it not a deduction to move from the law of identity into, which is basically just saying the same thing as the existence axiom, right? What is it about that which is not a deduction to move from there into the law of causality?
Well, first of all, I was talking about existence to identity. That's the first thing. But secondly, it's not a deduction, because you don't first learn identity and then deduce causality. You learn these things from experience, and you induce. From experience to experience, you learn that there's causality.
That might be the way. That might be the way that you learn it. You go, oh, there's all these things which are happening, and it all makes sense. There are laws, right? That may be the way
that's what Objectivism teaches. That's not just how you learn it.
But how do you validate causality? How do you validate the law of causality? It's not just by doing what Aristotle did, which is just looking out and saying, oh, look, there are these things which are happening, and they're immutable laws, which I reckon they're probably immutable, because that doesn't escape Hume, right? It does not escape Hume. The way you escape Hume is by deducing it as being a corollary of identity. Yeah. That is Rand's innovation.
Okay, so chronologically, however, the three axioms are not learned by the developing child simultaneously. Existence, Ms. Rand suggests, is implicit from the start. It is given in the first sensation. To grasp identity in later consciousness, however, even in implicit form, the child must attain across a period of months a certain perspective on his mental contents. He's not deducing. You're learning it from experience. That's not deduction.
Okay. So it might be the case.
You may argue differently. You may argue differently, but we're not talking about what Objectivism teaches.
It's about the validation of these laws. I agree. You probably learn that murder is bad long before you can fully deduce it from the non-aggression principle. Probably, right? Unless there's a really autistic baby out there. What I'm saying is the validation of these principles is deductive, right? He is deducing from the law of identity and various other principles
It's not
that all
deductive.
actually.
It really isn't. It's not. I mean, I don't know if you want to spend hours, and we can't. I mean, I don't have the time to do it. Maybe I can have you back on, and we can just debate epistemology, and I'm fine with that. But it's not deduction. You're never in a situation where you're automatically deducing.
I didn't say automatically.
Causality from a no. What I'm saying is I shouldn't use the word automatically. I'm sorry, but where you're deducing causality from identity, it's inductive all the way. You've learned this by experience, and you've grouped various concepts together, and you've induced that this is something. You have not deduced it.
I agree.
That's not true.
I agree that you've already probably heard of causality and learned that causality is a thing before reading Objectivism and the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. I agree that's almost certainly always the case, right? That you've already looked out and you've seen that there are immutable laws. But how do you validate, how do you verify that that is indeed an immutable law, right? The one way to try and do that is the way Aristotle did, right? And that does not succeed against Hume. Or there's the other way, which is the way that Ayn Rand does it, which is you say, hey, it's a corollary of identity. And then it does succeed against Hume.
Sure. You say that it has identity in things that in a thing does not act outside its identity. Got it. That's learned from experience, and it's learned inductively, not deductively.
It's
again, you know, I can have you back on to debate that. That's fine. I'm not trying to rush. But I had you. We were going to have a discussion about anarchy, and we've kind of gone away a little bit, and I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I just don't have the time tonight to really argue epistemology, but I'd be happy to have you back on. I've really enjoyed the discussion with you. They haven't exaggerate your prowess as a debater. You're very good, and I'm very glad you came on the show. Before I let you go, do you have before we close, do you have anything in closing you want to ask me or to say in closing?
I suppose if just to say in closing, because I think we've gone over most of the ground here. Just go on to liquidzulu.github.io and go to my course on libertarian ethics, and you can read it for free, or you can pay whatever price you want, whatever price you think it's worth, for the video version. And that has the entire basis of my legal philosophy, excluding the argumentum contrario I gave for the NEP there. I'll probably add it in at some point.
And you're also you have a YouTube. I've seen you're debating on YouTube. You're all over there as well, right? Yeah. And you're on Twitter. Yeah. You're debating, and how can they find you on Twitter?
Oh, at Liquid Tulu. It was a 2 instead of the Z because I was banned off of Twitter. So I think I was being a little mean to someone, and the Twitter administration was not liking that.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to having you back. I hope you'll come back because these are good discussions. I love a healthy debate. It's great. For now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. I'm Michael Liebowitz. Till next time.
Yeah, absolutely. See ya.
The recording has stopped.
By the way, I'm still streaming. Yeah, to be clear.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know you were streaming. I don't care. Oh, okay. Whatever. That's cool. Yeah, so we can definitely do this again. It's 5:36 and I'm in somebody else's house. I live with him, but it's still his house, and I'm housing up the office, and everybody's being quiet. We got 5 dogs, so I just can't go all night. But definitely we'll get together. We can. I can see there's plenty of things that we can discuss, and we'll probably agree on a lot. But I think it's very good, very healthy. You're very respectful in your method of discussions. You're very learned, and I appreciate it. And I look forward to doing this again and getting on Twitter. Maybe we can team up on Dave Smith too, because I'm pretty sure we both disagree with his take on immigration.
Yeah, we both dislike the hell out of him. Yeah, thanks for having me on, man.
Buddy. All right, you have a great night. All right. Well, I guess it's like midnight for you. Yeah. All right. All right. Have a good night, buddy.
Yep. See ya. All right. We're going to do we could do a post-debate discussion in Discord, I suppose. Let's see here. Yeah, I'll do a post-debate. Open Discord. Memento.
Epic Zulu W. Am I right, boys?
Indeed.
G was close.
I'm just gonna go to the bathroom real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, Casimir, if anybody says anything untoward, can you please let me know?
I will.
Oh, he's gone. He's gone.
All right, now that he's gone, guys, get.
God, guys, that's right when they got to the fucking core of the whole issue.
Yeah, he was evading.
Dude evaded a lot, but like when they finally got to the point is when he had to go, and that's
Yeah.
I have some questions for the holy one, the great one, when he returns from the pisser.
We should talk. We should ask him about what we were talking about last night.
I don't think it's relevant for this. This I'd like to hear some of his
Yeah,
thoughts
I
on
know.
this debate.
It's, I think I'm proud to have had a hand in making this one happen. That was fun.
Oh yeah,
I don't understand. Why did he prefer to just explore 5 or whatever different questions on a surface level than just get exploring one to its full depth? He kept evading and coping about it.
Because he was coping. He didn't.
part of this is Zulu should have had his flow chart out like he usually does and narrowed him down on like, hey, this is a contradiction. Resolve it.
Yeah,
I don't.
It's like that.
I'm curious as to why Zulu didn't have that going today.
Yeah, it made the whole debate a mess.
he wasn't willing to resolve the contradiction between saying that he had some sort of value of that, like the idea that it's objectively wrong to initiate conflict, but also, creating these exceptions where it's okay for his state to initiate conflict.
I mean, he also devolved to consequentialism several times. Just the theory practice dichotomy. He was straight up inducing stating the theory practice dichotomy, saying, "Oh, I mean, I just can't imagine it. I can't imagine it." That's what anybody would say to a fucking objectivist or an anarcho-capitalist. I simply can't imagine a society that would operate that way.
I can
on that.
I can his primary position. After all, he is a consequentialist. He is a decar. He's he's just in the beginning of philosophy. I guess I don't think he's managed to get very far yet.
Yeah, his opinion is that he can imagine a state which violates no rights, but he can't imagine a rights enforcement agency which violates no rights. Even though there's times when Zulu explained rights enforcement agencies and he acknowledged that they're the same thing.
Yeah, but then he skipped. He was like, "Okay, let's talk about something else."
Exactly. He would then move on, and he wasn't fundamentally willing to grapple with the idea that like the state is aggressive, and also just that Zulu like wasn't interested in talking about like the practice of efficiently protecting rights. Like the question was really, should there be a unique rights protection agency that's allowed to violate rights? And he was he's unwilling to answer the question because it makes him obviously wrong.
Well, he also fundamentally, he didn't even define the state. That was one of the issues too. Unless I missed it, I didn't hear him once define what the state was. And that's something I've never...
And that's on purpose.
There's one issue though that I sort of expect this. So when you talk to people who are not, I don't know, not maybe well read on anarchism, so they don't have clear definitions, you expect that. What I don't expect, what annoys me, is when people have, I don't know, just a false history of American capitalism. And when they say things like, oh, there could be a monopoly that controls 90% of the market. And this is an objectivist that I believe read Atlas Shrugged. And Atlas Shrugged is not just a pure invention by Rand. It is inspired by just 50 years ago, before she wrote Atlas Shrugged, there were these titans of industry that have created the market. And that's what's shocking about this sort of statist perspective. Standard Oil or Rearden Steel, which are equivalent historically, it emerged by creating the market. It created a product that didn't exist at the time, and it created a market, which is all the working people that it's allowed to have light in their home and allowed to have light industry and other things, because they invented cheap standard oil refinery and a cheap standard method of shipping it to the East Coast. Like so to blame them for having 90% of the market, where they created the market, they expanded it to by tenfold to many more customers. They never managed to raise prices once. There was never the exploitation phase ever. And Zulu is right. By the time of the antitrust laws, the monopoly wasn't even 90% anymore because technology spread out. So that is the thing that I think, as you speak to people, needs to be stressed the most, is that they can go and read non-statist history about the so-called robber barons that didn't rob anyone.
But see, it was possible that they also did not do that, and therefore that should not have happened. And the state is justified. Because, of course, we got to get the Cartesian down.
Dude, yeah, like the primacy of the state's consciousness he was on that shit when talking about how to prove something in law. Zulu, I'm curious, why didn't you do a flowchart this time?
I did, but I didn't want it all the way up on my top monitor because I'd have to fucking look all the way up, crane my fucking neck. It was on my bottom monitor. I could show it on stream if people want. I'll scroll through it or something.
I wasn't under the impression of that because I thought, like, usually you're a little more like, hey, you said this, now you're saying this. These two can't be true at the same time.
Oh, maybe I just...
He tried to get him on the contradictions, but he kept evading.
Yes.
Like, every single time
that was another reason I thought that.
Yeah, every single time he got really nailed down, he was like, okay, let's talk about this other thing. He just kept saying, I disagree, I don't really think, but we don't have time to go into that. And he just kept going to something else. And this cycle repeated the entire stream. It's insane.
And what was that shit at the end about deduction and induction? That's insane.
Yeah.
What was that disconnect?
He does not know what deduction is.
Yeah, so, like, yeah, it's true that objectivism, like, all evidence begins with the senses. But saying it begins with the senses, right? You don't validate the law of causality by going, oh, look, all these things are causal. Therefore, there's a general law of causality. In the same way, by the way, that you don't validate the law of existence by going, oh, there's a bunch of existing things, right? You say, okay, well, existing, it has to be an axiom here. It doesn't make sense to say otherwise, right? It's a spiral theory of knowledge. You begin, first off, by just observing that there are a bunch of causal things, right? That causality is what you'd start there. And then you spiral around into deductions, right? You start going, okay, well, can we verify this with things, with our axioms? And you go, oh, yes, we can actually. It took a few thousand years, but you can do it.
This isn't a counter argument against you at all, but Peikoff, I believe in his Objectivism through Induction series, did say that causality was induced and not a deduction from the identity axiom. He said that the deduction he showed in OPAR was rather showing a connection between them rather than proving, or rather than validating, I should say, causality. That confused me, though.
Mm-hmm. Rightfully so, because it definitely is a deduction, right? Because if all you have is, like, the best philosopher on just theory of induction with all you have is, I'm observing causal relationships, that's Aristotle. Brilliant philosopher, don't get me wrong. But he can't stand up against Hume. The way you stand up against Hume on this, oh, I don't know anything because what if it was just a coincidence and whatnot? The way you do that is you say, hey, identity implies causation, right? And then Hume can't say shit, right? Because then you've completely dissolved the necessary contingent dichotomy. Because Hume's entire, even before Hume, everything in the Renaissance up until the Enlightenment, it was all going like, oh my god, well, there are all these contingent facts. So because they're just contingent, they could have been otherwise. It's no. The metaphysically given is absolute because identity implies causation. You can't have it any other way. There are no alternatives possible. And objectivists love to use that as a general fact, but they are apparently ignoring the fact that the way you get it to be a general fact, the way you validate that, is by deduction, not by just observing a bunch of causal relationships. Because to even have, like, the theory of induction is based on the theory of causation, right? So if you've got induction already, where it's like, okay, I'm inducing a bunch of things, and you have the scientific method and all that, and I mean, even Peikoff will admit, like, the theory of induction isn't perfectly fleshed out. There's a lot of room to grow there. But the way you get there in the first place, the very first thing you need to establish is that there are universal causal relationships that are immutable. They don't change at all. And you do that through deduction.
I don't really understand why you got, well, not you, he got so stuck on what some guy said. It doesn't really matter at all. I mean, the discussion was about, okay, how do you deduce these things? Why did it matter so much to him that, oh, he didn't say that word, he worded it differently? It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that was never
What about when
explained, but there was another point I think was sort of important and missed. There is this idea that if you decide to act, this is the Cartesian doubt, if you decide to act and you don't believe, like Liquid Zulu, in like that there's there's dichotomy between Cartesian doubt and pure confidence about what you're observing. I think that's a bit of a false dichotomy, and he sort of knows this. You can have a wager theory where you say, well, I wager that what I observe is true, and I will couch for the possibility that it's not true. For example, if I observe a murder, then I might say that I should imprison this guy forever, or enslave him and incapacitate him, make him unable to murder again. But I'm not willing to kill him because that would be a wager over something that I'm not confident of. And a legal system can perfectly exist within those confines, within having some doubt, not like total doubt. But for him, having any doubt with what he is observing means that he can't act. He needs a government body to tell him how to act, which is ridiculous. You need the government body to possibly like a governing body or some standard to explain yourself to other people, perhaps, if you're beholden to other people, but you don't need it to act, because then nobody can act.
But then the real question begins, and it's like, okay, but how does the government know? And that's the thing he is basing everything on. I think this is a problem of what he's basing all his arguments on, because when Zulu talked about natural rights, he was like, okay, but who sets them and shit like that? Like, nobody. You discover them, and he can't really get his mind around that. All of his arguments really depend on the state being the first thing in existence, and it's pretty weird to see it in action.
We have those. So the problem also is there's conflation between rules and laws, or I don't know, objective law and local law. You can go to there are facilities where it tells you on the door what the laws are. It says these are the laws. No shoes. No pants, no service, right? Or whatever it is, no shirt, mostly. And that's a law. That's a private law or a private institution. Perfectly fine. And that's what Liquid Zulu told him about this. About that you can have. It's just to tell him that something can be built up on objective grounds. It just evokes a sort of boomer fear and doubt, where
Cartesians.
Well, no, but it's also based on just a lack of historical knowledge, on a lack of present even knowledge about various societies. We have societies that operate very, very close to covenant community standards. They're doing so accidentally, but he's not even aware of that level of evidence. So his argument becomes incredulity. It's like, oh, it's so incredible. Well, it's incredible to you but it's not incredible to other people who have empirical observations. And it's not, and incredulity has nothing to do with the theory. You're not rejecting the theory when you're incredulous.
What I also think that was really important is that, and I think this may have been missed in the discussion because it was a quick event. Remember at the time when Zulu brought up John Galt as being some detective, and he knew what happened.
Bro.
It was pretty obvious. The case was set, but still he could not act in self-defense. Didn't this guy say he believed in self-defense in the beginning? Did he not contradict himself by just saying, "Oh no, he can't act in self-defense now"?
No,
might
he
just be
straight up
misspeaking
evaded
or
by
something.
saying, Zulu, what he said on that part when you asked him if he had the right to retaliate, he said, well, John Galt wouldn't. That's the same during the collective property debates when you say, what happens when they disagree? Well, they don't.
Yeah.
They wouldn't disagree. They would just agree.
Love.
Well, I think it's more fair. It's more fair if we postulate the perfectly rational man. It's more fair in that case. It would be like for the collective property debate. Oh, we postulate two people who always agree, and then they're not going to disagree, right? Obviously.
Well, just agree.
One more topic that hasn't been sort of raised is the idea of evolution, both cultural and very direct evolution. And what we've sort of observed historically is that there are some regions of the planet that are very, very easy to conquer, to establish authoritarian rule over for various, in my mind, topographical technological reasons. And within these areas, a civil society, a high-trust society, which those tend to conform more and more to the NAP, just never gets established. Well, so what? We have many counterexamples of which I'm speaking to the incredulity here. It is incredible that genetically certain groups are less aggressive than others over time, or certain cultures are less supportive of aggression over time. It is incredible. Yes, it is unique in human history that certain things in Western Europe were different than other parts in the world. And in other parts in the world, you see levels of aggression that are much higher. Now, you can have a genetic explanation to it. You can have a cultural explanation to it. But they're both evolutionary in nature, meaning it wasn't always that good. It took centuries of certain cultures constantly losing and so other cultures constantly emerging for these various philosophies to grow in that direction. And obviously it wasn't perfect because they also had Gnosticism and other toxic influences that keep being brought into the system. So specifically, you can't say, you can look at, I don't know, the British common law and see that it's a step above towards the current understanding of the NAP. That Locke was another step forward, and each of these steps forward was incredible, on its own. If you just imagine it being invented. Well, how did it come to be? Well, it come to be through lots of testing, through lots of observation. People were seeing where success lies, and then they started integrating ideas out of what they were observing about society. They were observing failed societies. They were observing non-failed societies. Why those existed? My answer is topographical, but it doesn't really matter. They're just, they show up.
Yeah, I know Kinsella talks about this. I talk about it in the first episode of the law course that I did, where it's there is this development towards judge-found law, and where you have judge-found law, where it's judges trying to do justice in individual cases. They obviously didn't have the theory of the non-aggression principle and all this stuff, but they're trying to work it out. It's a very similar thing to how philosophy in general has developed. It's people trying to work out. They're looking out there and going, okay, well, what is this? But when you really need to concretize it, you gotta get the deductions in there. You can't just have, well, it looks like this way and that way and this other way, right? Because then the skeptics are gonna have a fucking field day with you. And that is the role. That's why it's a spiral. You keep going back and you induce new things, and then you try and deduce to figure out how that's grounded, and then you induce more things, and you keep going around and around in a spiral. And that's how knowledge is built up.
Question about corollaries.
Subversively Hegelian, just a note.
Quick question about corollaries, Zulu. Whenever you derive a corollary from one of the axioms, that's necessarily a deduction, right?
Yeah.
The inductive part is the first part, just identifying the axioms. But anything after that, any corollary is necessarily a deduction, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can induce things like the law of causality. Obviously, that's how most people learn about it. Initially, they see that when they drop a thing, it keeps falling. When they push something underwater, it'll float up, right? That's how you do it initially. And I'm sure we all remember, like, figuring that out initially. But if you want to be a philosopher and actually ground it, that's when it becomes a corollary, right? This is a very specific word. It doesn't just mean, oh, it looks kind of similar, right? A corollary is a term in like logic and mathematics where it's something which is just readily evident from one of your lemmas or one of your proofs or one of your axioms or whatever, right? You tack it on with just a very, very simple, oh, and then also this thing, right? And the way you get to causality is you have first the law of identity and also all actions of entities. And I can actually look up, because again, I've got this brilliant website, which is the brain. Where I've got all these deductions set up. And if we look at all action, I'll have to go to fucking goddamn, what was it? Fucking causality. I haven't set out the fuzzy finding very well at the moment.
What's also interesting, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So it's the all action of entities idea is basically like there isn't action as against the entities. We're just floating actions, just doing their own thing. We just have these actions. An action is an action of an entity, just as there isn't £5. Like, you know, something is £5, but where is the £5? It's like, no, it's intrinsically tied to the object. So that's why you don't get, that's the error of Heraclitus and Pythagoras, which we can all see on screen right now. I'll share it in the Discord chat as well.
Well, that's why Peikoff provides that example in the history of philosophy with the car crashes. Where is the car crash?
Yeah.
You know, when you're asked in a debate against certain orthoros, where is the mind? Point me to the mind. You should do the same to them. Ask them where the car crash is.
Yeah.
Because it's just as ridiculous of a question. Where's the concept? Where's the concept? Well, it's
where is the self, though, Casimir?
Yeah,
where is the self?
Yeah, where's the car crash? It doesn't exist.
Okay, when you look at something and you see it's red, where is the redness? Is it in the object or in the perceiver?
But I think this is a very important thing to talk about because I think this is a fundamental problem he has with epistemology in general because he kept conflating the things that he saw first for the cause of the thing being true itself. Like I would have then asked him if he didn't see it, would it be true or not, and how would he find out? I don't think he would have an answer to that. Like how would he know if something is valid if he didn't see it? Because the reason he said, "Oh, causality is true and valid, whatever," is because I saw it in real life. Like, what if you didn't see something in real life? What if you haven't experienced something first? Would it be true? Would it be false? How would you know?
Yeah, it's sort of an implicit primacy of consciousness, but a subtle one.
Yeah. Oh, at the end, it was pretty obvious. It wasn't that so.
Zulu, do you see yourself talking to him again and debating the same subject?
Maybe not the same subject, but I mean, I thought he was respectful. I talked to him again.
I think it sucks that he just glossed over your argument for the NAP.
Mm-hmm.
Like you spent some good time explaining it. Obviously not as in detail as your paper, but you're not going to do that during a debate, right? But like you gave this whole argument And he's just like, yeah, but I don't know. It doesn't really make sense. Doesn't follow. It's like, that's not an argument.
I don't expect him to do it. You can't expect him to be able to do it unless what you need is like the things that move people like him are things like the Coconut Island question. Like you need to have something of this tier where you're asking them finite questions. There are yes/no questions that corner them into a mental trap where they have to admit a contradiction. And only that way will you be able to sort of force in a live debate some thinking, or at least, let me think about it and we'll talk about that, in a few days. But I would think that's when you can't get it raw. I don't think you can get it raw because it requires him to like integrate a concept live and then admit that you're right without actual sort of a rhetorical force applied, right? So the Coconut Island analogy, it's strong against people who don't know the answers to it because, or like we have the wrong philosophy because it forces them into this choice. It's a false choice.
Yeah, but the issue is Zulu's argument for the NAP is established on objectivist grounds, objectivist epistemology. That should be easy for an objectivist to say, well, shit, you're right.
Well, he's not an objectivist, I guess. But there's another issue which is which comes about with just asking people questions, because I don't know if you noticed, but he did sometimes back up on his answers. He did contradict himself at times. And maybe it wasn't immediately obvious. Maybe it was missed. And I think the fact that it was missed is important. A way to prevent this would literally just have a flowchart on the screen that he can also see. And we can all precisely pinpoint, hey, you contradict yourself now because you said this that time. Now you say the opposite of this. It may take a bit more time, of course, but it may not be that practical, but it's
the reason why that didn't happen for this debate, I've explained why the flowchart wasn't up on the screen, but that's really beside the point. It's more keep pushing. So the reason why that didn't happen here is it's more of a scattershot debate. There wasn't like a specific proposition which we're debating. Like it wasn't taxation is theft, just as an example, right? And then I can just keep systematically attacking. Okay, and then we're back to here. Just have a syllogism, right? It was more like, okay, we're just going to have a general debate over minarchism versus anarchism. So there is less room to be just, and then here we go. It has to be more, okay, well, we're over here, and then let's pivot into this discussion, because, I figured we'd have limited time anyway, because most of his podcasts are fairly short. So I was like, okay, let's try and cover the ground here and get the general idea out there that there is this true thing, which is objectivism implies anarchism. That's what I'm trying to get out here. Rather than just, he failed on this one point, but I'm still an objectivist and not an anarchist.
No, I completely understand, but that's I think one of the reasons this didn't really pan out is because he kept invoking the argument that, we have limited time, we can't go into this thing, which will prove me wrong. He kept using that. I think I understand why scattershot debates are fine, but this is also their downfall, because you just can't nail him down on anything, especially when he kept weaseling out of every single point. I think you should have locked him down a bit more on some things, like especially when you were talking about natural rights. And he evaded completely because of his personal disbelief and stuff, or when he said that, you presuppose everyone is a rational actor. Those things are pretty big things to say, and I think you should have courted him a bit more on that.
So can you give me one of the things you think I should have pressed him on? Because I'm not opposed completely to the idea that I didn't press him enough, but we have a specific.
I'll give you one. So. When he evades you give him a long explanation of natural law, that being objective, and he said okay, and it's fine, or one of those sort of things. Then you've gained ground, but the audience didn't notice. And so one thing you can do is, before you answer the next question, is quickly grandstand in a very polite manner. Say, I'm glad you've conceded that the objective law is true and you have no argument against it. And so now I'm going to answer your next question. and that puts him in a position where he has to quickly say, no, I didn't. But it looks like he's on the defensive, and not like he just brush you off as a king. So you can like stress it a little bit more.
I think
and then it's yours.
I think I did do that. I'm remembering one point where I said, okay, well, we've already got this, objective legal basis there, right? But then there was like a miscommunication, because I thought he was conceding to that we had, where it's objectively true that John Galt is indeed allowed to retaliate. But it didn't pan out properly because there was a miscommunication about whether we're talking about self-defense or retaliation.
Yeah, I have one I'd like to throw in there. Go ahead, though. Me?
Okay, I'll go.
Go ahead, man.
Okay. Remember, in the beginning of the debate, well, not the beginning, but somewhere early, there was a talk about resource management, and I had a very, very, I think, correct gasp. I had some intuition that told me, hey, this guy may be just ignoring the ECP or completely saying states can allocate properly. There was a discussion of allocation and efficiency. He kept saying it would not be efficient. Things would not be efficient, and as opposed to what? And the only thing he could say is it's opposed to the state. And then you could have nailed him down on the ECP, because if he denied the ECP, I don't think anything else would have followed after that. I think it would be pretty fatal.
Well, he didn't deny the ECP. I remember, because I did push him on it. He said, yeah, the ECP, I can't resolve it. It's going to be inefficient. And then he said, well, it's going to be more efficient for other reasons. Then I pressed him on those other reasons, right? So we've already established.
I see.
The ECP is still standing here.
I may have
another direction that if you are already going into empirics and into the presumption of a minarchy that there is a state, then they should concede the iron law of oligarchy, and they should concede to like very common critique of power that that power tends to concentrate its own source of power, and then it tends to centralize and is rewarded for centralizing itself. And the parasite it becomes switches from whatever mission you have, and there's mission creep in the institution that you can't account for. So that's another possible direction. I think it's weaker than just nailing somebody on the philosophy first, because there's cope-like answers. There's like various religious answers that people give. If we just had a lot of people like me, then this government thing would work.
Yeah,
that's sort of the cope.
I will agree on. I did want to get into this with just my NEP proof first, but that isn't how it panned out. I wasn't able to maneuver into that position within the conversation, because obviously I can't just be like, he asked me a question, it's like, well, hold on first, I want to speak. That's there is a perhaps rhetorical move I could have done there to go after he's done his introduction. I go, oh, and I just want to ask you, I just want to first off establish my case, something like that. I can agree there that I should have gone heavier into the philosophy right off the bat. I kind of let him just keep posing the questions. I kept going, well, no, I'm not discussing the specific bureaucracy, but here's how you could do it. You either are peaceful about it or you fight, right? Which is true. I think I did a good job on the defensive, but I could have been on the offensive right off the bat.
I have another one I'd like to ask about. He on multiple instances said something to the liking of well, I simply couldn't imagine that happening, right? This is a theory practice dichotomy, and as an objectivist, we're supposed to be against that. There were many instances where we did that, and he just devolved to consequentialism. Do you have any disagreement with that statement before I carry on?
Well, I would need a specific example of hey, he did theory practice dichotomy when he said this thing, and you didn't address it.
You guys were talking about private security firms versus the state. I don't remember the exact I mean, because you went into that a bunch of times, right? He kept pivoting to like, well, how would this be done? How would this be done? So in like one of those instances, he basically said like, yeah, he just couldn't imagine that. Not everybody's rational. Not everybody can actually do these things. And what if this?
I think I did address that. I was like, well, yeah, it's also true in the status system that not everybody's rational. So there's no.
You did say that, yeah. Yeah,
I
I guess
completely.
Yeah, he did. It's just like with the restaurants. He created this false dichotomy between different institutions, some using force and some not. Well, you see, the right enforcement uses force, but the restaurant doesn't use force. Have you ever been to a restaurant? Which restaurant you've been to doesn't use force? It has like specific ways that it forces you to pay for what it does. Otherwise, it would go out of business. It might be using the monopoly of the state at present moment to enforce its rules, but it definitely has to enforce rules.
I mean, even like the McDonald's over here, if it's on like the main street, they'll have like bouncers outside and stuff. Like they'll have people there to make sure nobody's causing problems.
And or otherwise, you have some kind of a societal taboo or standard. You have a high trust society, and you just assume that the high trust society doesn't have force. The reason why it's high trust is because force has been applied to it in the past, and people were taught a certain way, and they have a certain culture which is enforced. And as soon as a different agent shows up, like somebody foreign that doesn't know how this high trust society is supposed to work, then the naked force has to come out. And when it doesn't, you see an immediate, like, complete destruction of everything. They fall apart. So yes, force is implied in everywhere. To claim that it isn't is sort of a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah, and these bouncers, you know, by the way, way more efficient than like calling the police and waiting like 5 days for the police to show up. It's like, hey, what happened fucking a week ago? It's like, no, just have a bouncer there, and he fucking like tackles the guy and brings him outside and throws him onto the curb, right?
You know, to mention, we had, since 2020, we had so many examples of private policing actually functioning, with public policing standing by and doing nothing with victims. Like defending property, communities that were at arms simply defended their property.
Yeah.
It simply happened. And you could say, well, look, it happened very rapidly in a situation of total chaos and zero preparedness. Nobody was prepared to defend their neighborhood from roving marauders during the Summer of Love riots that we had in the US. And yet some communities managed to do it simply because they had guns and proper laws on the books that were more anarchic than in places like New York, where you can just stand and watch your store get looted and you can't do anything legally.
Yeah.
Or like according to local laws.
Yeah, this is the whole idea behind castle doctrine. Like, just defend it yourself.
And then you can tie him with, well, listen, there's the city of Amsterdam. There's a very rich history of private law, of volunteer security forces that were not just funded, but directly manned by the entrepreneurs. Like, you have pictures of them, and we know what they did, and they were all in private industry. This is the beer guy. He is the beer magnate. He served in the guards. Now, he wasn't out every single night. He would probably hire and pay other people to do so, but he did walk out, wear the uniform, and got himself recorded, immortalized in the picture.
Two things on that. It very much reminds me of like Hank Rearden on his factory roof, like fucking shooting down and everything. But also, I didn't know about Amsterdam. Can you send me like an article or something on that?
Yes.
Could you upload it on
I have a question. Yeah.
Yes.
Was that is this in reference to the painting that you showed me once?
Yes.
Kashmir.
I forget what the company is called. They have this funny name.
But they had the end cap colors, which was really cool.
Yes. They also, just a coincidence, they happen to be wearing yellow and black almost every time. Well, actually, it's orange, but the red disappears a little bit and becomes yellow.
Maybe they're mutualists. They're secret mutualists.
Man, I really
Maurice
can't
S.
believe how he kept
Both of them were on the factory roof. He said it was Danconia, not Rearden. I just have to correct him. Both of them were defending the factory.
I'm in chapter 6 right now.
Well, I mean, this means nothing to you then.
Yeah.
It was really strange how he kept not understanding what Cartesian doubt is and how he was not partaking in it.
Yeah, that was just quite fucking silly.
Yeah, I don't understand how he didn't understand that.
Yeah, I think that was just
Well, you couldn't,
evasion.
Yeah.
Also, when you get, how would you be certain? You know,
Real.
You gotta show the picture on stream. I'm sending you the link right now, Zulu.
Yeah. Also, when you like formulated or when you had your NAP argument, he was immediately like very defensive about it and such, which was kind of strange. He should have just asked you to clarify if he done. So, I mean, I suppose it's
he hand waved it. He completely hand waved the argument.
Yeah.
There's limited time, guys. He can't answer everything.
Oh yeah, ANCAP Renaissance people. I'm just gonna.
Yeah.
Whoop.
Yeah, the private production of defense has a very interesting history if you start digging into it.
Hey Zulu. The guys who want the modern day debates guys that want to set up a debate, they said that they would prefer to do it on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll sort that out in DMs later.
Are you two doing a 2v2?
Yes. Hopefully.
Oh, cool.
Against who?
It's two guys that from the modern day debate server. Now my friend got in touch with the people from modern day debates. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but it's a channel. It's a pretty big channel.
Could you give us like a quick rundown?
Yeah, modern day debates is a pretty big YouTube channel. It has like 100,000 subscribers, where they basically just host debates on various topics and stuff like that. And I got us on there. Me and Zulu.
That's cool. I assume you know your opponents. Maybe I didn't hear it. I may have like a temporary brain malfunction, but I could you repeat if you didn't? If you said
the one guy his name is First Amender, and then the other guy I think his name is JFK, John F. Kennedy or something like that.
Oh my god, it's the real John F. Kennedy. He didn't die.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
First Amender is like a server creator in the Discord community. That I think he is some sort of constitutionalist neoliberal type.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And you will have fun with him if.
And what about the other guy?
If I remember correctly, you're gonna have fun with lots of evasions.
I'll be honest with you guys.
Man.
I'm not really familiar with whom I'm debating. I just heard modern day debates, and I was like, "All right, I'm down," because I really like modern day debates. They do a lot of good debates.
It's
that's
good to
gonna
hear.
be real fun.
That guy is not a newbie to debates at all. I think his rhetoric should be fairly good. Like,
Yeah, that's why I wanted Liquid with me. You know what I mean? So he could help me out. I brought in the big guns.
Hey Zulu, may I ask? I didn't watch the whole debate. May I ask how it went overall?
I won.
Okay. Common Zulu W.
Yeah.
Zulu never loses.
that's why we're criticizing Zulu, because the other guy is. It's just unfair to put him further down.
Was that guy also a libertarian?
I don't think he could be classified as it. I mean, he denied a lot of things.
He's an objectivist. He's like just a standard like Ayn Rand lover, just a Randroid. I call them zombie objectivists. I can explain that. Basically, I think they're worshipping a dead woman first, so zombie in that sense. And also they're a poison, they're a plague on objectivism. They go out in there and infect other people, and it's doomed to die. Right? This undead, of course, it's going to die. This philosophy, if it's going to be zombie form, it cannot survive. I go over this in my more heavily in my discussion with Adrian from Springtime of Nations. I'll just see how you can. Oh my God! No, don't bring that up on
That
stream.
was a very good discussion.
I watched that one. That was a good one.
Yeah.
If we just look up Springtime of Nations, Liquid Zulu.
It's funny how it was in a weird aspect ratio.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
just
yeah.
doesn't bother to fix it, I
Like,
guess.
Small screen instead of large phone screen, and yeah,
He said he's going to
kind of
re-upload
awkward
it.
on PC.
Yeah, it's Objectivists and War, Zulu's Innovation. It's that video. But yeah, I go over it more heavily there, why I think they're wrong on that. I'll send it in the chat. Public address.
Esme, could you also put the article in the chat? If not, if you already did, where did you put it? With Amsterdam.
Who's that
Your mic is
handsome fella?
muted.
No, I'll put it in VC text right away.
Thanks, man.
So look at
you
the
get
Meager. It's the Meager company and the Shooterati. The Shooterati. Such a
Wow,
cool
that's
name.
a really fitting name.
The cool part about this picture is that you can research, and there is plenty of history of like. There's enough hints about each person, what they did, and how they managed to pay for being in that picture.
Yeah, it's the same thing with
everyone
Iceland
in
as
the
well.
server.
Like, they would just be like guys. They would just become like a local chieftain. The one unfortunate part was they had to be voted into chieftaincy by the other chieftains. I mean, well, it was just a guy in the community who was like settling disputes, and he would bring in some like arbiters and whatnot. And this has been a thing throughout history where you've had some fairly anarchic societies, and they would just resolve their disputes. It'd be fine. One funny thing about like the Icelandic dispute resolution system, they're very good at documenting these things. This is how we know. They used to have like trials against ghosts. If your house was being haunted by someone, then you'd have a trial with the ghost to see like what's going on there, and then the ghost would go away, of course, because you had a trial. And they're a good Icelandic ghost, so they would respect the law, and they'd say, "Hey, you're not allowed to haunt this place anymore," and then the ghost would go away.
This is anarcho-capitalism in practice. You know, in Opar, Peikoff said that it's funny because he's a historian, but he said that anarchism has never been tried successfully, besides a few failed communes here and there. And I think
Which
he
is
was
completely
referring
false.
to Catalonia.
Again, Springtime of Nations, there's actually Prax Ben that organized this series. The Springtime of Nations has the playlist on the channel. Just look up Anarchy and Reality. It was based on the video that Anglo-Libertarian did on Kospaya. And like there's all sort like the MRH did one on the Wild West on how anarchist that was. I did Iceland. I believe Springtime of Nations did what did they do again?
Macalonia or something like that.
Yeah,
in Ukraine.
Macnovia,
that's it, yeah. And the Prax Ben, he did it was something starting with an A, something in America, I think.
Acadia.
Yeah, it's Acadia.
Acadia, that's it.
Acadia.
Yeah.
There's also I've heard there's something in north west of Spain. I've heard somebody mention there's like a 400-year-old or 800, I think he said, like kind of anarchist. I don't know much about it. Do you know about it?
I think I heard about
Like
this.
North
I was doing John Galt School with Ayn Rand Center Europe, and a guy was talking about anarchism versus minarchism in one of the lectures there. I think he mentioned it, but I can't remember where it was.
There are also people who are I wouldn't say that they're full on like ANCAPs because they don't produce defense, unfortunately. But the way they live their life is effectively ANCAP, which are the Amish Mennonites. There's a great series. I'll link it. Look up a video titled "Dinner Invited to Amish Dinner," and I was shocked that video because I just watched it for fun. And it starts with like these based ANCAP takes off the bat, like in the intro of the video, and it becomes more and more ANCAP as it goes, and you just say based repeatedly. And
David Friedman.
Is it the one by Peter Santinello?
Yes, exactly that one.
David Friedman wrote something about how Amish law or whatever, and that was it was from his book called, I have it on my shelf, Legal Systems.
That's a weird name for a book.
Ours.
That was about fuck.
And I only read the Amish chapter. I intend to come back to that book, despite it being made by David Friedman. It was actually made by 3 authors, and it was David Friedman co-authored it. But I read the chapter on the Amish. That was very interesting.
Also, there's this part of American history where it's like boiling the frog. Nobody notices this, but the United States was a lot more closer to an ANCAP nation 100 years ago, just over 100 years ago. Many of these institutions that currently seem overpowered and ever present just weren't there. And somehow, in the middle of that, compared to every other country in the world, the United States was accelerating earlier and faster than all of them. If you look at, even just the raw GDP chart. It was 20 years ahead of Europe and every other place in economic development, even though economic development started in like the Industrial Revolution was much more intense in Britain than in the US initially. But the US very quickly overwhelmed them. One of the reasons is because you couldn't enforce patents in the USA. And so people who were breaking with new technologies, we have their names, like one of the founder of American industrialism is literally a guy that brought in a more advanced steam engine to the United States because the monopoly in the UK prevented him from doing so. And so clandestinely brought it up.
Yeah, it's you could read about this in Baldwin and Levine's Against Intellectual Monopoly. He goes all over. Two guys. They go all over the steam engine and the history of that and everything. And it's like, it's very weird that now today we have like the Americans. They're like, oh, these Chinese, they're stealing our patents. It's like, well, they're gonna fucking overtake you then. Like, just stop with this retarded bullshit.
Do they have patents in China?
They don't respect American patents, certainly. I don't think they have very strong intellectual property protection, because they'll just like they'll start making factories which are like producing, like one example is they're producing electric vehicles which are basically just Teslas, but produced by a Chinese company for cheaper.
They sell fake Nike shoes too.
Yeah,
like,
they produce all sorts of shit in China.
Nikes.
Everything's made in China, and you want to know why? Do you want to know why? Because it's fucking they don't have patents and shit.
Being chilling.
Like, get rid of the patents, and then American producers they can start like making like robots and shit. And they're for like the past few decades they've been so concerned. It's like, oh, but China, they have such cheap labor, and we can't compete with that cheap labor, which is why we need more government to institute like tariffs and shit, which is only hurting American consumers, by the way, and the people who want to trade with American consumers. But the real solution there, get rid of the fucking patents and shit, and then you can start having crazy robotics and all that stuff, and you'll get free labor, essentially, just price of electricity.
They do theoretically have a patent system in China. However, it's only on paper. Nobody ever gets persecuted. And if your company in China gets really good, even though they violate patents, it's all brushed under the carpet. It's very selective. The party really literally chooses where it's enforced and not. And it's just China, man. You know how it is.
That's one of the possibly the more doomer takes on the USA compared to China and other countries, is if you look at energy production. The USA, one of the engines of the Industrial Revolution in the USA was the cheap oil, was Standard Oil, making refining much more effective. That's what pushed production to incredible levels. It's actually touched on in Atlas Shrugged, which is interesting that objectivists aren't aware of this history. But if the United States doesn't develop like the next most efficient thing, which is atomics, which is nuclear power, and shifts to it quite rapidly, then it will fall behind China simply by China having an abundance of energy, because that's the main factor of production. You can obtain everything else quite easily. There's an abundance of materials in most places that are readily accessible. Yeah. It's the energy to extract them and modify them that's the economy is based on.
Yeah, this is why the Kardashev scale, it uses the amount of energy a society produces to rank them, right? You're a Kardashev 1 society if you produce as much energy as the entire planet can produce, right? You're a Kardashev 2 if you can collect the entire energy of a solar system. Like, that is how the Kardashev scale works. That is how innovation works. And I've got like an article I did for free. I don't think it's published yet, but I'll make a video on it at some point. Where it's Apollo versus Dionysus, where you want to be climbing up the Kardashev scale. You want to be climbing that up. Just keep pumping out energy. I do have a published article, which is the Anti-Environmentalist Manifesto, where I'm talking about this. Like, hey, when you look at that number of CO2 produced by humans, look at that as a sign of how fucking great we are, how brilliant we are. We are able to pump out this much CO2. We are so fucking cool. That's how much energy we're producing, basically. Because most of the energy is coming from fossil fuels, right? That is a great thing. It's a brilliant thing. And all these fucking the fucking environment doesn't like it though. Shut up. Get rid of them. I don't care. They should kill themselves.
So can we nuke them?
Kill them.
Oh yeah. Can we nuke each one of them in particular?
I managed to find out the name of that guy. It was Samuel Slater, also called by the British Slater the Traitor, because he took a whole bunch apparently of British patents and moved with them to the United States, where he basically published them and started introducing them into business.
Based.
And also he started in the most free state at the time, which is obviously Rhode Island.
That's why they call it Rhode Island, because ANCAPs hate it.
Nice.
Stupid roads.
Kind of unfortunate that the stream ended like that. I only watched the first like half hour of it. I thought the guy seemed well intended.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's a Jim Taggart or anything. But I do think he's a zombie. But I think he's more amenable to changing, because he didn't just immediately say, "You're not a real objectivist, Liquid Zulu, because you don't agree with Rand on everything." Right? But I know for a fact he is a closed objectivist. He does think it's a closed system. But I mean, fucking, Sude, who has appeared on this stream before, friend of the channel, she disagreed with anarcho-capitalism. She wasn't an anarchist. Then she watched one of my streams on intellectual property. She was like, "Yeah, he's right. He's right." So I'm changing my mind. And immediately, once you got the the IP thing flipped, they're no longer a Randroid. They can't be. Like, that was a big thing with Rand.
Yeah.
If I actually recall, Liebowitz does not call himself an objectivist. In one of his first podcasts, he says he disagrees with Rand on the definition of value.
Oh no!
So I think that was hinted at, wasn't it, during the debate?
Okay, so yeah, what I was operating on was, he said when he disagrees with Rand, he calls that Mike Leibowitz's thoughts rather than objectivism. So maybe it's just a semantic problem there.
I don't get this. People want so much from reality. They want a person to be as brilliant as Rand, while also having no flaws and never making any errors.
They want John Galt.
They want Liquid Zulu.
They want John Galt.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, but wait.
Even John Galt forestalled someone.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't think.
Well, hold on. We shouldn't spoil that, because Schizoid hasn't read it.
Myself.
Wait, who's John Galt? What are you guys talking about?
Yeah, hey, by the way, you should watch this interview between Walter Block appeared on Michael Malice recently, and the first half of the conversation is brilliant because it tells Walter Block's perspective, but there's a crucial moment where Michael Malice provides his perspective, which really clarified Rand for me. There's this famous example of her kicking out students whenever they pointed at contradictions in her books, and he kind of explained a possible steelman of why she was doing it.
Yeah.
Obviously, because of it.
I saw the first part of that interview when I was our watch club for Westworld in Sue's server was delayed the other day, so I was like, oh, I'll watch because it just like premiered, right? I watched the first part of that. I'll have to watch the rest because I mean I just love listening to Walter on anything. He's just such a nice guy. He just exudes this energy of just positivity, you know.
Yeah, that's true. But again, what people have not, they want to deify. This is the thing. The expectations towards Walter Block is that he never blunders, doesn't make mistakes, doesn't have like large lapses of judgment. But he's only human, and he can have all of those things. And the problem is, the reaction is to excommunicate, and like Hoppe. But the proper reaction should be, he's open to dialogue. You can like show him arguments and show why his argument is flawed.
Mm-hmm.
He's so open to it, even when he's 80 years old, whereas Hoppe becomes a crankier and crankier bastard every year.
Yeah, and it's especially like offensive to me. I'll use that term. I don't use it lightly. That Hoppe makes literally the exact same error Walter Block does in this issue. Like, Walter Block is saying, well, Israel as a collective are innocent and Palestine as a collective are criminal, right? Hoppe makes the exact same error when it comes to borders. It's the native citizens as against the foreign citizens. You know, there are way smarter arguments for Israel on the side of Israel versus Palestine, right? Casimir has debates on Israel versus Palestine. He's in favor of the Israeli side. I don't really give much of a damn about it. But I can recognize these bad arguments like a mile away. I sniff them out a mile away. But it's hilarious that Hoppe, of all people, is the one to try and cancel Walter Block on this issue. I haven't read Walter's response paper yet, but I did see this one part where he's like sort of insinuating that Hoppe is just trying to vie for the role of Murray Rothbard's true heir, which is apparently, it looks true, you know, for prima facie, right?
One thing I saw a lecture that Hoppe on the Mises Institute, they posted today at the 30-minute mark. Hoppe says that it's not a logical contradiction to go up and down the stairs at the same time.
No way.
He said it's like at the 29-minute mark. I'm not providing the full context, but I think it's funny if I don't provide context.
Listen, Hoppe has, this is very funny about Hoppe and both the borders issue and the Israel-Palestine issue. He has a solution. He already proposed it. He says, this is the standard of legalization. And he has a brilliant article which people misunderstood about Ukraine-Russia as well. These are two gangs, they're fighting. You can either be a jurist on the issue or like a judge, or you can stay out of the issue. But then he's demonstrated, or like he explained how he believes judgment should occur, which is the victims need to bring evidence in individual cases against individual crimes. That's his own standard of adjudication. And yet he's like willing to be collectivist on some issues and collectivist on one of the sides on the other, whereas he's not supposed to be allowed to do any of that according to his philosophy. He's supposed to just say, well, I don't know, and yes, this is likely the case, but he's not supposed to be strong on either side. And then he's supposed to like explain, no, it's actually a difficult issue to resolve. These are the steps you have to take as an ANCAP to resolve such a conflict. And the tragedy of the whole thing is that nobody's doing it. Everybody is sort of just devolving into some convenient side of it. Go look up the property rights. Go find the evidence. You know, we have such cases. We have a case in the U.S. courts, even not ANCAP, U.S. courts, where an entire chunk of one of the U.S. states might go to an Indian tribe with all the property owners on top of it, having to resolve that conflict over their original appropriation. It might just be resolved. Enough evidence might be presented because there were written contracts for that tract of land. And that's the ANCAP approach. Everything else, like trying to collectivize, is unrelated. Walter Block is wrong. But the funny part is that in his refutation of Walter Block, Hoppe makes similar errors.
I'd take Block over Hoppe any day, me personally.
You can't say that it's Hoppe's birthday.
It is? Oh yeah, it is.
Today
That's
or
right.
yesterday. Yeah.
I literally watched the lecture where he said that today.
Hoppe birthday.
Yeah, I'll say anything I want to get about Hoppe. He fucking ousted goddamn Walter Block from the Mises Institute. Or he spearheaded
That's
at least.
horrible.
Like, that's fucked up.
Oh, wait, I want to say something really funny. There is a human action podcast with a Bob Murphy who hosts the podcast with Dave Smith, and Dave Smith made a joke about that situation, and Bob Murphy looked fucking horrified. He was like, let's not talk about that. It was just fucking hilarious. Bob Murphy looked fucking like he shit his pants.
Watch Michael Malice's explanation in Steelman of Rand. I think you'd be surprised because it does make a little bit of sense. I'll spoil the mystery a little bit. Basically, if you're approaching a good thinker and you're claiming that two of their videos or articles have a contradiction, then you don't need to like state that. Just start stating the proof. And if you just like approach somebody and say you're in error, where they don't believe themselves in error, that's sort of you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're focusing on the fact that you believe that they're wrong. If you believe that they're wrong, why are you there? You know, why do you want to be in Rand's club if you believe that she's wrong? Because if you believe that she made an error and that you can convince her otherwise, then start with the convincing part. Don't start with just pointing it out. I think that might be like a difference of approach.
Yeah, I think we can have that, but we can also have. I think Rand was probably very disagreeable. Like, I think we can all agree on that. She was not a very, at least in certain circumstances, she was not the most charitable woman to be around, which is a deliberately chosen word there.
Poor Murray Rothbard. Your wife's a Catholic. Kill yourself.
Oh, but she was spitting on that one, though.
I mean, yeah, but it's still funny.
It's okay, so it's okay. Double A, I want to investigate this a little bit. If I married a Catholic, would you say, hey, you're not allowed to be my friend until you divorce that Catholic?
So, no. But with Rand's context, I believe she tried convincing Rothbard's wife. Rothbard's wife did the thing that was like, oh yeah, you know, that makes sense, but I'm not gonna.
Excuse me.
Then it's not merely your wife's a Catholic; it's your wife is irrational. Divorce her. and then he says, no, she might be irrational, but you're not allowed to say that to my wife. That just translates something terrible about Rothbard.
If he's Murray Rothbard. I mean, fucking Ayn Rand. I think we would all enjoy being friends with Ayn Rand, even though she was wrong about IP, very wrong about IP.
I don't know about that. At
the fucking state.
At the very least, if Rand was going to tolerate an evasion, that would just cut off productive discussion on some degree. I mean, maybe I would still associate with Rand. Rand was wrong for cutting Rothbard off completely. But the idea of being harsh on someone when they cut off a discussion with an evasion, that's good.
Sure, so she could maybe... one thing I think would be fine is being harsh with Rothbard's wife, not giving her the leeway of just saying, oh, well, you might believe that, but I believe something else. Fine, yeah. Be harsh with her and say, no, you're wrong here. Stop being wrong. You're being a dumb bitch. Dumb fat bitch, you know, whatever. Whatever it takes. But to say, hey, Rothbard, to give the ultimatum, Rothbard, either you divorce this dumb fat bitch, or you're out of the collective. That strikes me as a different level to it. It's playing on. I want this. This is a dumb fat bitch, and also I'm trying to completely isolate her from everything.
Sure, I agree with you in principle. I guess that's the argument. But if I recall the facts correctly, it was Rand brought this up to Rothbard, and then Rothbard thought she was disrespectful. I wasn't aware that it was or that Rand gave an ultimatum.
I might be misremembering or something there. I might be mistold.
No, it wouldn't be surprising because she did it in other cases. But this is what's sort of important in all of this. We should expect all of these people to be incredibly cranky and to get much crankier as they get older. Because think about this from their perspective. They started when none of this existed, from nothing, where Rothbard and actually Walter Block says a brilliant thing where, just a brilliant recollection, where he kept coming back to Randians even though he hated being with them because he had no other quasi-anarchists, libertarians, anything to go with. Like he had nobody else. And yet we have all of these interconnected communities where we don't feel isolated anymore. And we have victories in various countries. And yet all of these older generation philosophers, the founding fathers sort of, they don't get the recognition that they deserve. They probably won't get the recognition that they deserve within their lifetime outside of these limited, 5% of the population intellectual organizations. And I do believe that that's grating, and some of their responses to that stop being as rational. Like Ben asking Hoppe which part of ethics we should, try to reinforce or try to work on as jurists. And Hoppe just tells him, oh no, it's all solved. Like, what? It's all solved? Really? He's like, oh, just keep popularizing everything. It's all done. And I disagree, but I expect that because, well, he's all... but not just Hoppe. It's an old man. And this is like a constant thing that you expect from old men, is that the scope gets reduced. People start annoying them more. They're surrounded by people who just tend to be surrounded by yes men and fans. And the response to that is to believe that, well, there's no innovation. But he's not looking for innovation because he has other things to do, like, raise goats. He has a wife. He has these philosophy conferences. Mm-hmm. And so I don't expect him to be on the cutting edge or realize, oh, there are still problems to resolve. And why should we? He already did enough. Like, why is this constant demand for them to be right about everything and right in their actions? We can respect them without that. They're just humans.
To be clear, I want to get something out there. Are you just saying, yeah, I expect that this will happen? Or are you saying it's fine that it happens?
No, it's not fine. I don't think it's fine. I think it's a bad quality. But I expect, men as they grow older to become less rational, to start losing their faculties, partly for physical reasons, and partly because life takes a toll. You get especially when you live a hard life, which is for a philosopher that doesn't get the recognition I believe he deserves. It's very hard to live with this. And so there is an element of spite and an element of I want a secure legacy and all of that. And so they start doing these petty things. I don't condone those at all. But I think we should, as observers, should be merciful towards Walter Block and towards Hoppe. And we shouldn't say, this cancels out his life work or whatever.
Yeah.
They both should have a joint statue, and one of them should put bunny ears behind the other. That's it.
It's a lot like Chinese water torture or whatever. Like, if you were just stuck in a room, they did this with MK Ultra, right? Where just somebody is just constantly giving you retarded arguments and not acknowledging anything you're saying, just for 30, 40 years of your life. Eventually, you're going to become a little disillusioned with new people saying that you're wrong, right? yeah, I can understand it on that level. It's understandable why it's happened.
I would say this. What if Joanne Rothbard was a Thomistic baddie?
Well, she's a baddie. She must be a rational person. Because we all know physiognomy is correct by Ayn Rand.
Let's talk about Rand's other bad take, her anti-patriarchy advocacy.
Wait, the what?
No. She said she wouldn't vote for a woman president.
She did.
Okay.
But,
What? Based. Yeah, wait, but why?
Because she thinks that only men are like suitable for a leadership. She didn't think women were suitable for that. Like they can be leaders in certain areas, like they could be a Dagny Taggart, but not for like presidential leadership.
Because she said a woman by their nature, I don't agree with this, by the way, but a woman by their nature would enjoy hero worship, thus they need someone above them to admire, and being the president is to rule over everyone, therefore you have no one to admire.
And then all the Randians clapped.
Woo! And the interesting part is she never established a traditional or like a family with children with a husband who she worshipped as she advocated for others to do. And this is perfectly fine. Maybe another person.
Curious.
Yes.
I wonder how many babies she aborted.
I
How many times Nathaniel Brandon knocked her up and she got an abortion?
Zulu, do you promise you won't ever get cranky and irrational as you age?
Yes.
Based.
I knew it.
Liar.
I knew that.
I would not be surprised if she had a parent-child-like relationship with Peikoff.
I think that is the case. I mean, Peacock was introduced to her when he was like 17, right?
Yeah, he's also her heir, like her legal heir.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit more to that than just I guess. It's pretty legal too.
Yeah, fucking Peacock is old as shit now. Have you seen him?
90.
Yeah.
He doesn't do lectures anymore, right?
He did one live stream like a couple of months ago. But boy, is he old.
He's like in his late 80s, right?
90s.
No, he's like 100.
90. Oh, shit.
90s?
The guy's old. He's
exactly
old,
90.
old.
He'll be 91 in October.
At all.
He's older than Kashmir.
I think
that's really old.
That's a young man. I can't find a current picture. Oh, never mind.
He really does not look 90s at all. Not at all.
No, he does. He certainly does. I'm looking at a picture from 4 years ago. He looks like he's in his 90s when he was 80 something.
Show me one because I don't think I remember him then. Put it in a VC text or something.
There's a picture of him on his 87th birthday, and he looks like he's pretty old.
Let me check.
Like he's got the thing which like really old people have, where like their skin is just all really loose.
Yeah,
like it's just.
He's still got swag though. I'm looking at his fit.
Oh, he's swag as shit, bro. I mean, he's still Peacock.
Yeah. Have you seen the YouTube channel Millennial Rant or what is it? Millennial Objectivist or something like that?
Maybe.
I've seen of it. I've seen of it.
She's an objectivist, and she attended Peacock's last lecture a few years ago, which must have been super epic.
Who would win in a fight? Who would win in a fight? Prax Girl or Millennial Objectivist?
Oh, it's Millennial Objectivist. She's the brown one.
Yes.
Yeah. I know her. Or I know of her.
I don't know why, but Prax Girl's.
I don't know if that's actually her.
Yellow, like disease.
When I'm trying to remember what Prax Girl looks like, I'm just remembering who's that lady who's like a American politician. She's Hawaiian. Tulsi Gabbard. I'm just picturing Tulsi Gabbard when I'm trying to picture Prax Girl.
Her name is Millennial Rand Fan. I just pulled her up, but she apparently went to Peacock's last lecture, which
damn.
That's cool. Does Binswanger still do lectures? Yeah, he did one just like in the last year, didn't he?
Yeah, because he was quite a bit younger.
Never watched the Big
than Rand.
Swinger.
How old? Binswanger must be still quite old.
Yeah. 60s or something, if I'm not mistaken.
The only book I have by Binswanger is the Ayn Rand Lexicon.
I took a tactical screenshot from the Millennial Rand Girls, one of her latest videos.
It's Peacock. He doesn't look that old, man.
Oh, he's old.
Bro, what are you looking at?
I posted a pic of Peacock or a video of Peacock in VC text. He is really old looking. Right there.
Very old.
Man, I've seen people look older.
Yeah, why doesn't Binswanger
I mean,
have his own Wikipedia
maybe
page?
mummies
Oh,
or
yes, he does.
something. But like, this guy's old. He's really
He
old.
is, but he
How long have we
I
been
don't
talking
know,
about
man.
this?
Longer than any
Binswanger
other
80.
topic. We've been on.
Why are we keep Peacock is old? We're like, Peacock is old. Peacock is old.
fun to talk about it.
Do y'all think
He's not that old. He's older than what you think he's old. That he's old.
He's
still
very
old,
old though. He's like so
do y'all
old.
think
And it's still older.
He's older than Eduardo.
Okay, now that's old.
This
do you
is the,
guys think that
you should have used this word more in the debate, Liquidzilla. This is real criticism now. Peacock is objectively old.
do you guys think we'll win just because all of the zombie objectivists are about to die?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And Urine Brook
yeah,
is down.
pretty sure,
Sure,
yeah.
He's retarded.
Also, so like my theory of why we will win, beyond just their dying, it's a philosophy which zombie objectivism specifically is a sect which necessarily has to die. It has to die out. They're worshipping a dead woman. They necessarily can't respond to any new threats. It's not possible because it's like, that's not objectivism anymore. We just have to keep repeating Ayn Rand over and over and over and over again. And they'll try and say, well, no, we're not just repeating Ayn Rand. We can have new innovations in philosophy, just not objectivism. You present any new innovation in philosophy, they're like, no, that's not objectivism. That's not objectivism. You bastard. Right? They won't have any of it. They will not have it. So they are going to die off with Ayn Rand. They die off with Ayn Rand. They're just holding on a little bit longer, like a zombie. Like, people have done calculations on, like, shows like The Walking Dead. Okay, all the zombies are going to rot and die after this amount of time. Same thing happens with zombie objectivism. It rots and it dies. Like, it can't continue forever. Not possible.
Total zombie death.
The open objective, or the objectivists that say it's an open system. Do you know any of their actual disagreements with the closed system objectivists?
So
Like, they're
the basic
caps, right?
The basic idea, well, I'm an open system objectivist, and I think it's an ANCAP. But
Yeah.
not all of them do. The basic disagreement is, what is objectivism? Is it whatever philosophical ideas Ayn Rand held and explicitly endorsed? Pardon me. Or is it a general system of philosophy which could evolve beyond Ayn Rand? I'm of the latter camp. And the closed system people, I love them for this. They will bring up the most retarded examples you could have possibly imagined to demonstrate their point. Like, I remember Jeroen Broek. He brought up the example of the general theory of relativity. He was like, well, that's Einstein's theory. So that's just Einstein's theory, whatever Einstein said. No, not even close to the truth. Right? The general theory of relativity absolutely can and has been advanced beyond Einstein. Like, if we do, I did a physics course, right? If we do anything in relativity, if you're talking about black holes, you're talking about Schwarzschild, right? Schwarzschild radii. Who is Schwarzschild? He's not a fucking Einstein, that's for sure. Let's look at the goddamn Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project, that's all developments on top of the general theory of relativity, right? It's all built on top of Einstein's. Sorry, not the general theory of relativity. I'm wrong there. It's built on top of Einstein's theories of nuclear quantum stuff, right? But still, just because it was Einstein's theory initially, doesn't mean you can't have any developments from that, right? We definitely have this with the theory of gravitation, right? There are all sorts of predictions from the theory of relativity, which Einstein himself did not come up with. They came up with from different people. And whether you agree or disagree with these predictions or whatever, Einstein didn't come up with the entire general theory of relativity. He came up with the core of it, which is the exact same case with Rand. And so, to just clarify what my understanding of what objectivism is the philosophy which takes existence as having primacy over consciousness, right? Objectivism is applying the primacy of existence across the board in philosophy. And that is why we have the Austrian legal theory is part of objectivism and not Rand's politics. You'll notice in the stream, if you're an eagle-eyed viewer, that I never refer to it as the objectivist theory of politics, because I don't consider it the objectivist theory of politics. I think it's incorrect to call it the objectivist theory of politics. I think the objectivist theory is of law, not of politics. I don't think politics is an actual thing. The objectivist theory of law is the Austrian legal theory, and that is the correct way to go about things.
Oh yeah. Do you recall Peikoff's definition of objectivism in Opar?
Oh, he was just listing off, well, here's what the objectivists believe in metaphysics, and here's what the objectivists believe in epistemology.
Actually.
But the general idea, the general idea behind all these, like, oh, first they believe this, and then this, and then if we abstract an extra layer up, we do abstraction. Wow, crazy. You notice that it's applying the primacy of consciousness, the primacy of existence across the board. That is the essential characteristic of objectivism.
And so Peikoff said something like that. Really quick, I just want to throw in. Peikoff says something exactly like that. He says, I think verbatim, objectivism is the full systematic expression of the primacy of existence.
Yeah.
Boom, done.
Yeah, but he doesn't, to be clear, he doesn't define objectivism that way. He says that is what it is. But the way he defines objectivism, and the way for some reason, they're retarded, I guess. Every objectivist who's ever been asked, what is objectivism? Even Ayn Rand, it's like, oh, here's what we believe in metaphysics, and here's what we believe in epistemology, and here's shut up, you dumb bitch. Like, just fucking, what is the essential?
Yeah. That's very, very strange because it is what's identifying it from all the rest. It's why you don't call it just Aristotelian realism, even though you can classify it under this next development in Aristotelian realism.
And it's also why
it just has a distinction.
And like Ayn Rand herself would get very pissed off at any interviewer who said Ayn Randism. She was like, no, it's not Ayn Randism, to be very clear with you, Mr. Sir. It's objectivism. Wow, clearly there's some sort of distinction between Ayn Rand herself and the philosophy she's developing.
There's another interesting parallel with Einstein's theory of relativity. Not to discount his great contribution to science and integrating all of these different ideas. He was the first, but I think it's quite reasonable to... I'm pretty sure you can discover people who are publishing things like within a month of what he was publishing, integrating things just slightly slower, and ended up being just not remembered by me or by you or by anyone else. But if most of the science that day was people were pushing things forward based on the exact precedents, like the generation right before them, and he just integrated all of it faster, explained it simpler than the rest, and so he got recognized rightfully for it. But if he didn't exist, that doesn't mean that theory of relativity wouldn't be invented. All the components were there, and in fact, other people were integrating them just as fast. Yeah. So it is very important to both recognize him and isolate him, that the concept and its formation is more important, and the pedigree of it is actually the thing that gives it value, not whatever name is attached.
Yeah, and we have to remember, when Einstein was developing this theory, communication was not particularly easy. Right, we were at war. The whole fucking... I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's this world war going on. And the world was at war. So you couldn't exactly just shoot a tweet to somebody or whatever. And actually, it emulates a condition from an earlier theory, which is who discovered calculus, right? Because Newton and Leibniz both had calculus at basically the same time, with different interpretations of it. And even way before them, in ancient Greece, we've discovered manuscripts, which were lost to time, because fucking Plato took over, which have calculus on them. It was discovered way back when. So you can have these ideas rediscovered over and over and over again, and that's why we don't call it Newtonism or Leibnizism, right? Whatever you might want to call it. It's called calculus. And calculus was rediscovered at various points. It's not tied to a specific thinker. It's not just what Newton believed about mathematics or what Leibniz believed about mathematics. We don't do this literally anywhere else. Unless you're calling it Ayn Randism or Rothbardianism or something like that, then sure, you can have an argument where it's like, okay, that's just what they believed, right? And that's why you can have the Misesian business cycle theory. It's what Mises thought on business cycle theory. Or, the orthodox Rothbardian interpretation of contract theory is something like this, but we've developed Anarcho-Capitalism, another general term, beyond Rothbard, which is true. Both those things are true.
And to add on to that, don't forget about the marginalist revolution. The subjective theory of value was discovered 3 times independently in the same decade. So there's that.
Yeah. Same thing with argumentation ethics, by the way. Frank Van Daan, he discovered argumentation ethics independently of Hoppe. That's why it's called argumentation ethics, not Hoppian theory of rights, right?
And Peikoff in a crude form also discovered it independently from Hoppe. And I heard from
Rothbard did too.
And and Hoppe pointed that out. A very brief passage in the beginning of the Ethics of Liberty, Rothbard hinted at it. And I think Stratino said to me once that even St. Thomas Aquinas had a inkling of it too.
Rothbard had one great quality. He was one of the few who conceded that he was in fact bested in that moment. And that gives him an incredible amount of honor in my eyes, that he could look at the student and say, yes, you're right, I agree. And in fact, go on, move forward. Instead of, I've invented everything, just popularized.
Yeah. Can I go slightly off topic and ask a question to Zulu?
Hold that thought. I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick.
All right. Actually, I'll ask it to Kashmir.
Before you do that, you have to be a language autist, sir. Never say can. You have to say may.
I ought to be a language autist. I agree with you. It's been a long time coming for me. I still slip up, as you just saw. It's been a long time coming for me. Switching can with May, and when me and Stratino were watching the Hoppe lecture this morning, I was very confused on what he was trying to get at, because he was trying to use the word can't like may not, but I was confused what he really meant. So
it's easy to remember. When you ask for permission, you're acting like a commie. You say May, and because May 1st is the commie month or the commie date, you can remember it.
Well, I wanted to switch topic about Hoppe, and I think I agree with you what you were saying about earlier, Kashmir, to have mercy and respect and recognize what Hoppe did good for the movement. But I think me, Arshad, and Stratino over the course of these months have been talking about how Hoppe. Obviously, this is from an objectivist standpoint, and I don't think, Kashmir, you're fully on board with it, if I remember correctly, about objectivism. But from our perspective, because the objectivist perspective of the philosophy of history, the history of philosophy, views Kant as like the ultimate bad guy, and because Hoppe is a neo-Kantian and is bringing back neo-Kantianism way stronger than Mises had ever brought it back, we kind of view Hoppe as a threat to the movement, not as in like him like individually as a threat, but the consequences of his Kantian influence. like earlier today in the lecture, I don't know if this was Kantianism or just a senile like fuckery, but he was, like I mentioned earlier, he said that going up and down the stairs at the same time is not a performative. It is a performative contradiction, but not a logical contradiction. Which I'm like, what?
No, he did not. He did not.
Yes, half like
No.
30-minute mark. He said that. He said it. However, but it's not a logical contradiction. It is a performative contradiction. And me and Stratino were freaking the fuck out.
Oh, no way, dude. I've got to hear that for myself.
I'll defend Kant a little bit. I don't think that the fact that he was drinking water means that we don't have to drink water because it's Kantianism. He said certain things that are useful, or he noted certain things that are sort of interesting. But I think his main sort of guilt in my eyes is that he opened the door, intentionally so, to a lot of future contradictions and the massacre of philosophy. So I don't have to be fully on board with objectivism to recognize that Kant is at least recklessly dangerous, if not a villain. And I think he is sort of a villain because we know of his ulterior motive. He was not truth-seeking. He was religion-defending in his intentions. He was specifically defending against a branch of rationalism that he believed was, destroying religiosity in people, and he was trying to criticize that. And that gives you a motive that is independent from truth-seeking. And I think that led him to a lot of just bizarre takes. And his take of art, his ideas of aesthetics are the most harmful thing that I don't know. It's like he did to.
I know how you feel about that. So
yes, it's like the damage could be. People don't recognize how damaging to human society it was. What he did to aesthetics. When I realized
then.
So Zulu, the context is that I was talking about Hoppe as a threat to the libertarian movement because he's bringing back neo-Kantianism way stronger than Mises had ever implied in his writings. That's what I was just talking about. I was just wondering what your thoughts on that was.
He doesn't really go into epistemology much. I think he's, for the most part, just an economist and a rights theorist. If we have someone like me publishing, then it's negated.
No, I'm not saying specifically about epistemology, but his epistemology showing through in his ethics, such as I may not have a justification for it, but I highly suspect that many of his, for example, his idea that collective property right is legitimate, both explicitly and implicitly in his defense of state borders. I suspect it is a fault of his epistemology, which is necessarily a form of Kantianism, and I think it is poisoning the libertarian movement. And on top of that, many of the Hoppians are just fucking retarded, like Christian nationalists. And I have to highly suspect it's because implicitly, somehow, through his neo-Kantianism.
Yeah, I think that's a criticism of everybody before me. I don't think anybody was out here proselytizing objectivism with anarcho-capitalism before me. I think.
Let me counter argue that, because Rothbard was an Aristotelian, and I don't. If Hoppe was,
but not
was
explicitly an objectivist.
It's true, but it's way better than Hoppe being explicitly
better.
a
Yes,
neo-Kantian.
right. But like what I'm saying is this sort of degradation. It's with all of them up until we get me.
No, I say that like if we didn't have Hoppe, or if Hoppe was better, like Hoppe was an Aristotelian, then I think that the transition of libertarianism and objectivism as a synthesis would be way smoother, and probably would have come quicker. But with Hoppe bringing back neo-Kantianism, in its most strongest form, as in most explicit form, as it has ever been in Austrianism, I think it's going to be a challenge to overcome because it's already created a lot of confusion. We're going to face a lot of obstacles from the Hoppians.
I think there has always been a confusion within the anarcho-capitalist movement, because there hasn't been an explicit tying to a philosophy, which is objectivism, right? There hasn't been the explicit tying in there. So there's always going to, until that has happened, which it has now, there's always going to be, oh, well, you know, we can have whatever philosophy you want so long as we agree on this issue. But that isn't like Hoppe promulgating that. That's just what happens when you don't have it being tied to objectivism.
But I would say that Hoppe is pouring gasoline on the fire. And it's not the fact that, like, oh, Hoppe is just as confused as the previous libertarian thinkers as before. No, Hoppe is the most explicit neo-Kantian out of all the Austrian thinkers throughout time, as far as I can see. Like, he was not nearly, like, Mises was operating on the Kantian epistemology. Hoppe is just oozing with Kantianism. Like, listening to his lecture about how going up and down a staircase at the same time is not a logical contradiction, and the other dumb shit he said in that lecture. So
I'll have to watch it, but you may be right. But I don't think that I sort of almost don't care, because also as I linked to you in the VC text chat, there's like a big article posted on Mises.org about the 300-year anniversary of Kant and his influence on, I believe, Mises.
Yeah, Shane shared this to me. I didn't read it, but Shane shared it.
There's lots of links to other thinkers and other support. The article is still good because it also asserts all the people that disagree. I was first reading this article, I got pretty pissed off at it being like published. But then towards the article, it sort of redeems itself because it says, well, listen, there are all of these other directions in our institute that disagree with us. At least it recognized disagreement. But yes, I think that the time has come for a more open opposition against Kantianism in like the Mises Institute and within the philosophy. I don't really care about like what Hoppe is currently saying. Well, I would care if he, when he writes a book or when he writes an article and he's self-contradictory and incorrect. I understand that I think your assessment is correct that he is like toxic to the movement and will become more so as he ages. But again, that's just reality.
Of it. But it's not that the toxicity was causeless. I highly suspect that the toxicity is because of his epistemology and metaphysics. And I think it's exacerbated by the fucking stupid, retarded Hoppians that are all over Twitter and the internet and are just kind of like the logical conclusion of what Hoppe is.
Yeah, that's why
that community.
That's why I label myself a Hoppe appreciator and not a Hoppian anymore. I surrender the term.
Of course, I appreciate Hoppe for argumentation ethics. He may not be the first one to come up with it, but by far, it's the best formulation by far of argumentation ethics. So,
the blows.
Of course, of that, he gets major credit for that. Of course,
as he should.
As he should. And I'm not trying to like excommunicate Hoppe. However,
no, it would be ironic and funny if you did.
I think Stratino would do that. I'm going to be honest. Stratino has had a lot of influence on me. So Stratino would even be more spurious against Hoppe.
To be clear about Hoppe's innovation with argumentation ethics, he didn't take that extra step. If somebody correct me if I'm wrong, he didn't take that last extra step that Zulu made in his Anarcho-Capitalism. Something about law video. I'm forgetting right now. Sorry, I've been drinking. But Zulu at the end says, if you're in a contradiction, that when you say you ought do this, that means you ought not do it. Did Hoppe go to that last step and say, oh, therefore you ought not?
He did.
No.
Yeah.
He himself denies that he is crossing the Azog gap. I think he is. So does Kinsella. But I think he's just timid on that point.
That's correct. He is timid. If you read it, he says something along the lines of, in the original article, he has like a lecture that's newer, where he does something different slightly. But in the original first article that you can cite, he says, like, oh, I don't have to cross the Izod gap because, such and such. But then and then towards the end he says, but I actually do, or something very similar to it. So it actually does, because he can't refute that it doesn't, but it doesn't have to. If you're a bloody
Sure.
you can just accept the conditional imperative. Like, if you don't want to be shot by an animal, you ought not aggress. You want the conditional? Here's the conditional. You don't want to get shot, ought not aggress. Good, okay? Here's the conditional hypothetical. Solve the problem.
I think
is all vanquished.
It's also just, aside from this, people are just way too scared of Hume's guillotine. I'll just I'm gonna have to leave in a bit, because I want to play some Beyond All Reason. But the idea of Hume's guillotine, this is the companions and guilt argument, if you want to look it up. The fucking can't remember his name. Something with a K. Jeffrey Kaplan, that's it. He has some good videos on this. The idea is that, well, what is Hume saying with Hume's guillotine? How is he proposing this? He is saying that, well, you should not believe in something unless it's been proven by a good authority, or you've seen it, or yada, 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 yada. It's that first little bit there. You should believe in X, Y, Z. Whoa, that's an epistemic norm right there. It's a should statement. It's an ought statement. And what is he saying? You ought, the effect of it is, you ought not believe that ought statements have truth value. So it defeats itself, right? You can't have this claim. If you have epistemology, then you already have ought statements. You have epistemic norms. And if you're going to have epistemic norms, why not moral norms, or aesthetic norms, or any other sort of norm, right? If you're going to have norms, then you have norms. You can't have a norm which prohibits norms. It doesn't make any sense. And with that, I'll leave you all, and thank you all for coming, and see you later.